All right, folks, this time I promise this is the real thing. We're going to start now. So I invite you all to come on in and grab a seat. We're very excited to have everyone here. And we'll get started. So good afternoon and welcome to the Association for Enterprise Opportunities, Leveraging Regionalism to Empower Small Business Summit here at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. I'm absolutely thrilled to see such a diverse and esteemed group gathered here today as we embark on this transformative journey. I'm John Torres with AEO, and it truly is an honor to guide you all through the conversation and what promises to be an enlightening and empowering event. Today we're bringing together experts, thought leaders, stakeholders to explore strategies aimed at fostering small business growth within diverse regional landscapes. But before we dive in, just a few different housekeeping notes. We are using a digital agenda for today's summit, and we encourage you to use the QR code that you may have seen at the front of the room, and we may be able to throw that up, so we'll see if we can put that up for you. But that's the digital program. You'll be able to find helpful information. It'll have the agenda as well as speaker bios, so it's an excellent thing to get. Today's program is being recorded. Now, if time permits, the panelists will entertain a brief Q&A at the end of each session, and I'll be walking around with a microphone, so make sure you raise your hand nice and high, and I'll come over with the microphone, and we want to make sure that we capture that with the microphone for recording purposes. Now, we have two scheduled breaks with refreshments that will be served just outside this room, and I'll announce them from here. And if you have any questions, our AEO team members over at the registration table will be more than happy to help you. To kick off our summit, I will turn the podium over to AEO's president and CEO, Natalie Madeira Cofield. Natalie is an acclaimed entrepreneur, philanthropist, and leading figure in small business and a small business expert. Recognized by Entrepreneur magazine as one of the most influential women in business, she's also served as a presidentially appointed assistant administrator for the U.S. Small Business Administration. In this role, she facilitated the allocation of $1.2 trillion in funding and co-crafted the transformative Community Navigator pilot program, injecting $200 million into vital ecosystems and entrepreneurial ventures during a period of unprecedented economic challenge. At the helm of the Office of Women's Business Ownership, she managed a $70 million budget, overseeing the largest expansion of women's business centers in SBA history, spreading to over 50 states with 146 centers. Please help me welcome to the stage Natalie Madeira Cofield.
Good afternoon. I want to just first start by saying that this room is a reflection of what can happen when you have a committed, talented, and dedicated team that decides that they want to move forward with strategies that this organization has pursued in its 32-year history as the Association for Enterprise Opportunity. On April 3rd, as a collective, we came together and said we are going to launch in person our regional councils and bring our regional council leadership from across the country here to Washington, D.C., to have the kind of conversation that we need to have with national leaders, national thought leaders, and national political leaders to understand how we can leverage regionalism to support small business. And in less than 30 days, not only did this team produce this event, but you showed up for each other, you showed up for AEO, and you showed up for them. So thank you for being in this room with us today. JT shared my bio, but I have to tell you that for 15 years, I was the CEO of a national organization. And my very first month of starting that organization, I was vacillating in the ecosystem of the impact that the Association for Enterprise Opportunity can have on business organizations that support small business owners. I have experienced firsthand, I have participated firsthand, and I have been the recipient firsthand of the impact of AEO. So to be called to become the next CEO after an incredibly impactful tenure is a huge milestone and career moment for me, and I am extremely grateful to steward in and continue forward the torch that AEO has been bearing and lighting in communities across the country. Today is a day of kickoff. Today is a day of celebration. Today is a day of new starts. Wherever a few are gathered, many more are represented. We have a small but mighty community of folks in this room that represent millions of small business owners across the country. Hundreds of elected officials that sit in Washington representing our congressional bodies. Thousands of ecosystem partners. And this room is powerful and it is impactful. And we will see on display that thought leadership in the panels and conversations that we have. The first of which I'm super excited to be a part of because it is another full circle moment for me to be able to sit down and interview a woman who has put more than $1 billion into American communities throughout this country. Yeah, that's a round of applause. Who has been responsible for designing regionalism strategies at the federal level. So we all know here in DC that are gathered today and those who are going to watch later that the true impact of economic development happens on the ground in the communities that we serve. In Washington, the policy is created, the ideas are created, they have to be implemented with strong leaders like those in this room. And if they're not connected to leadership like you, then they fall flat. Alejandra Castillo, who is the Assistant Secretary for the Department of Commerce, leading EDA, has been at the forefront of this movement for decades. Many of you know her in many different capacities, whether she was the former MBDA head, whether she was the former CEO of the YWCA here in DC, whether she was a political appointee, policymaker, and now assistant secretary. I'm going to let JT introduce her, but what I am sharing with you all as I give these remarks is that my hope is that this moment continues to revolve full circle for someone else in this room. That the reason why we are gathered is not just to fill each seat, but it is to fill our minds, it is to fill our Rolodex, and it is to fulfill our purpose as leaders in the community. And so a full circle moment has to still be in motion. It has to still be revolving, and it has to still be evolving. And that's the moment that we're at with AEO. So I'm gonna let JT come up and do some introductions, and then we're going to get into an incredible kickoff conversation with Alejandra Castillo.
All right, thank you very much, Natalie. We are extremely excited to kick off today's summit with a special fireside chat. Joining Natalie in a conversation today is Alejandra Castillo, Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Economic Development of the U.S. Economic Development Administration. Say that 5 times fast. Assistant Secretary Castillo was sworn in on August 13, 2021, marking history as the first woman of color to hold this position. In her role, she leads the only federal agency focused exclusively on economic development. She guides the implementation of over $5 billion of funding, powering the U.S. Economic Development Administration and its mission to make transformational investments in America. During the implementation of the American Rescue Plan alone, she oversaw the investment of $3 billion across 800 projects, resulting in more than 200,000 jobs secured across the nation. As the daughter of immigrants and small business owners, her journey is the embodiment of the American dream. So please welcome to the stage Assistant Secretary Alejandra Castillo and Natalie Cofield.
And I was jokingly saying that Alejandra and I are on color brand today with AEO, so we are very coordinated in keeping it consistent there. Alejandra, it is always a pleasure.
I am humbled. That's such a gracious introduction. Yes, it's always a pleasure, and I was joking before that if there's anybody in Washington, D.C. who can track me down, it's Natalie. Because we've been friends for a long time, and we've been partners in many good things together, and that's what makes true relationships in Washington.
Absolutely. We've been two women who've gotten into some good trouble.
Yes, absolutely.
So with that, and as JT just kind of did introductions, 200,000 jobs, billions of dollars of impact. You can call you the billion-dollar woman. And I know in Washington we're not supposed to take credit for all the work that we've done as public servants, I understand. But I also believe in giving our literal flowers to people while they're still here. And I know how difficult building multi-billion-dollar programs can be. And so as we kind of start the framing of this conversation and this summit, which will go from you at the federal level to state and then local, talk to us a little bit about why regionalism was so critical for an approach for EDA during the pandemic and beyond.
So in order to really answer this question fully, we have to go back in history because, we have to see what we did not do in the last 50 years, right? So the last 50 years, we've seen so many changes with regards to our manufacturing base. We've seen changes in communities that have witnessed disinvestments. We've seen just in many ways a lack of intentionality. And then the pandemic hits. For the first time, we as Americans, we begin to learn the word supply chain. We begin to learn that not everyone had the opportunity to access the broadband. We realized that not everyone could afford not to go to work because we have, white-collar workers were much more privileged to be able to work from home. We saw the inefficiencies of our infrastructure. And that really was the moment that we needed, that crisis moment that we needed to wake us up. The Biden-Harris administration, in my 30 years in being in Washington, has done something that I've never seen any other administration do, and I've served in Clinton and Obama, and I've seen it. And that is to pass 4 really major historical pieces of legislation. I really would submit to you that this audience, we're going to look back five years from now, and we're going to say, wow, we were at the crux of it all. The challenge has been, in some ways, that even when the money is there, the investments are there, the capacity at the ground level is not there. So we saw a massive amount of dollars, and what kept me up at night, and my team and my colleagues, was that the communities that needed it the most did not have the capacity to, 1, sometimes apply for it.
That's right.
Or 2, even when they applied and were able to receive the money, to actually put it into use quickly. And that's because, again, we have to acknowledge we have disinvested. So we can't ask a community that has been relegated and forgotten to all of a sudden play in the major leagues.
That's right.
And I give that perspective because it's important. One of the areas that EDA has been focused on primarily is, 1, to look at where distress really lies and focus on how to engage them, hopefully making those applications a little bit easier. Because a federal grant is not for the faint of heart. So a bit easier, and we did that with the Build Back Better. We basically said, send us 5 pages. We reviewed it, and then we went to the second phase. So the other component that we also included was, instead of an entity applying for it, it was a partnership, coalition, a consortia. And in that effort, in that model, we also recognize that economic development doesn't know a city boundary, right? Many of you know people move. This is the DMV area.
That's right.
DC, Maryland, Virginia. because we recognize that economic development and economic mobility and economic opportunity doesn't really see borders. It sees opportunities. So at EDA, we like to say we are about people, places, and possibilities. And regionalism is exactly that.
I love it. At AEO, as I mentioned in my remarks, we're launching our regional councils for that very reason, which is how do you go deeper into these communities? How do you give regions the capacity? And I know EDA has regional offices across the country where you all are doing that very work. Talk to us a little bit about, Alejandra, this notion of a national strategy and where a regional approach fits into that, right? So sometimes in Washington, as I mentioned, we'll create policy and not think about the regionalism component of it at all. Not think about how cities have to compete with each other. Not think about helping to build coalitions on the ground in local communities, even through the way that we require the response to the proposal. Almost not forcing the market, but creating market partnerships that may not necessarily have previously existed. Talk to us about why a national strategy, if this is what you believe, can't work without a regionalism approach.
Well, let me go back to, you mentioned our regional offices. Yes, those are offices that, we have 6 regional offices across the country. And those are offices mainly from a bureaucratic perspective to make sure that we can cover the entire country. I make a distinction between our regional office and regionalism because sometimes it's across our regional offices, so I don't want to bound them. Here's what I would say. I think as the federal government, we took a very intentional approach to make sure that as we designed these grants, as I mentioned before, we were incentivizing the partnership. If you look at our grants, the Notice of Funding Opportunity requires community universities, community colleges, unions, workforce programs, workforce development. It requires philanthropy. And that was a way to incentivize the community to do 2 things. One was, we were not telling you what you should do, but you were doing an assessment of the assets in the community that you thought were competitive enough for this program. So it was bottom up.
Yep.
The second thing was making sure that when the coalition or the partnership came together to write that grant, that the individuals would look around the table and ask themselves, who's missing at this table?
That's right.
Because too often, the big entity, in some cases the university, will do the applications themselves. But this was an opportunity for big level funding. So it wasn't a $5 million grant, it was $40 million and above. And that in itself created a market structure, if you will, that said to individuals, if we want to win this, we have to come together, and we have to come in a way where equity is at the table.
That's right.
And that was very important to us as well.
And again, you were in the Bs. So with Community Navigator, we used a similar type of approach. We were at the $5 million mark with the size of our grant funds. And now we're coming up into a moment where those programs are coming to a conclusion, right? So many of them were formed with the American Rescue Plan. The funding was there, baked in until 2024. As we think about the future, where can private sector organizations, where can organizations like AEO and those that are in the room step in to what may be a gap? And is this something that you all plan at Commerce to continue to champion funding for? That's a question I've gotten a lot too.
It's a great question, and it's multi-layered. So a couple of things. Let's go back in time, right? For many decades, EDA in particular was a $400 million agency. Now, that may sound like a lot, but when you look at the need of the United States, the diversity, it's really small. Actually, we are number 12 compared to other OECD countries. So we paled in comparison. all of a sudden we have this spike. Economic development is not episodic. It's not a one-off. If you really want to drive change, opportunities, a robust group of small businesses in various sectors, robust supply chain, resiliency, it cannot be episodic. Unfortunately, this is an effort that myself and others at Commerce, we are constantly informing and educating our members of Congress, because this cannot be a one-off or a one-time. I react to this notion of once in a generation. I mean, I understand why they say it, but that's not a positive in my view. This has to be long-term. So you're absolutely right. We're at the apex of when these dollars started to roll out. We are working to get more dollars. Anyone here, I think there's one person at least who's been involved with tech hubs. Anyone here involved with tech hubs? Okay, so and I want to introduce the notion of tech hubs, which is another program that EDA is overseeing. Think about it. For the first time in our history, one can argue that economic development is merging with national security. Okay? What we saw with the pandemic was a weak supply chain, a weak structure where much of what we were consuming was not necessarily made in the U.S. or supplied in the U.S. So we now need to make sure that we are competitive and that we are leaning into the future of the technologies that are going to define our world. And in order for us to do that, that's a national security priority, but it's truly economic priority. So tech hubs, just to round it off, is really an approach to, one, diversify and democratize technology and innovation. Because as you know, technology and innovation does not only live in Boston, New York,
That's right.
Silicon Valley, no ding on those places, but there's great opportunity for technology innovation in the heartland and other places. And then the other thing is, who are the innovators and the entrepreneurs that are going to step in to those industries of tomorrow? And this is where you all can play a very important role, which is helping, one, in terms of information and education, because many entrepreneurs may be doing a widget, and with the help, hopefully, from the Department of Commerce, we can help you pivot to create widget X1 for that next industry. So it's the transformation and the transition into those industries of the future. So I would invite you all that we need to not just do these fireside chat, but that we actually need to create a relationship where you all are in the building across the street, learning and knowing and accessing as many of our grants, our technical assistance, our services, so that you understand what's coming down the pike and you can actually make that transition and create those jobs.
I love that you said economic development is a national security issue. It is. And one of the other things that I like too is, again, there was a lot of focus coming from SBA, right? There was a lot of focus on the small business owner. And again, AEO is not a direct to small business organization, right? We serve ecosystem partners like you. We are a coalition of network providers. And so many people lost sight of the fact that our organizations needed the same support that small business owners did, and still need the same supports that small business owners did. Because in some regard, they are small businesses. They are nonprofits, but they're still small businesses, right? And so I like that you're saying that, because again, when we are strong, our communities are strong, because we are in Main Street. We are in Main Street, of Main Street, and on Main Street. And the last thing, Alejandra, that I like that you shared as well is how diverse, and I'm going to close with this country is. When you have these positions that, you've been so fortunate to have, You get to travel all across what makes up the great United States of America. And you really begin to see that from Sioux Falls, and I know we have Sioux Falls in the house here, to South Carolina, they're totally, yeah, I didn't even do that. Totally different worlds, but still part of the United States of America. How can we celebrate that diversity amongst the regionalism and see all of what the United States has to offer as we close the conversation?
Yeah, so let me answer a couple of things. One is, I did say economic development is also about national security, and it's also about democracy. Because if you are paying attention to what's happening in our country, the fraying of the narrative as it relates to e pluribus unum is about the fact that people feel left out and they feel forgotten. And we have to change that. And that is by bringing opportunity, bringing healthy ecosystems. The term ecosystem, you probably hear it so often, but it is grounding. You have to think about not just the opportunities with regards to economic growth, but housing and childcare and transportation and everything that comes together, and climate. So that I wanted to make sure that I address that. What I'm seeing right now, and I'll end with this, is if I had a way to show you where the federal government is making these very large investments, think about it. $48 billion into broadband, $65 billion into semiconductors, another X amount of dollars in just energy, another X amount of dollars in physical infrastructure. You start plotting this out, and what you start to see is the concentric circles that starts to also build around these nodes of operation. I think that exercise is going to be important for this organization, because when you start to look at the map writ large and play it out a few more years, you're going to see places that traditionally had not been even thought of as places of innovation really blossom. If I were to say that Tulsa, Oklahoma and Oklahoma City are now becoming kind of the drone capital of the United States, right? We're looking at Wichita, Kansas with advanced aerospace. We're looking at Osceola County, which people, it's right next to Kissimmee, and people always think about Disney, but it's actually semiconductors right now. You're looking at El Paso, Texas with defense manufacturing. You're looking at Fresno, California with agrotech. All of these places in a few years, and you are at the forefront of it all, will be blossoming in ways that they are going to need you. They are going to need this talent that's in this room. They're going to need the infrastructure to build. And that's what we're betting on. Now, we can't do it alone. Federal government, we don't have enough money. We need to now bring private sector capital. We need to bring philanthropy and nonprofits, because what we're approaching is the diverse capital stack.
That's right.
And I think it's exciting. Now, you asked me the question, how do we ground this so deep that no one can pull it out, right? No one person, no one entity, no one administration, but that it is at the core. So that is what keeps me up at night. But I think I want to invite you all, if you haven't looked at a EDA website, please visit it. Give me a call. Send me an email. I will give you my email, because I always do, even though my colleague Sarah is going to say, oh. And we do get wonderful emails, and we respond to every one of them. My email is acastillo@eda.gov. Very simple, first initial, last name @eda.gov. And I give my email out because, as you know, Natalie, we're public servants. I believe in government. It's not the solution to everything. It wasn't meant to be. But it is the seeding of ideas. It's the seeding of efforts and initiatives that can be transformational. But we need your partnership to make it happen.
Yep, it is the creation of priorities.
Correct.
That's right. Alejandra, thank you
My
so
pleasure.
much for joining us
Always my
this
pleasure.
afternoon.
Pleasure.
Please
Thank
join
you.
me in welcoming.
All right, we'll pause for a quick picture. Sure, no problem. Please feel free to take pictures. Get up here. I'm going to take pictures. All right, thank you so much. Let's have another round of applause for this wonderful chat. Thank you so much. Absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you very much for being here with us. All right, terrific. So remember, people, places, and possibilities. That's what it's about. So as these conversations get rolling today, we want to be sure that you have enough energy to keep your mind sharp and your innovative thoughts flowing. So we're going to come up and take our first power break. And by power break, we mean 5 minutes. While we have an opportunity to rearrange some of the chairs here. Please help us keep on time, 5 minutes, and we'll be right back here in this room. You'll hear the announcement come across. So thank you very much, and we'll see you in just a few. Should I move this chair?
Yeah,
Okay.
This goes away.
It's nice and light, too. I was surprised as I moved it.
Can I go ahead and put this on the stage or like next to the chairs?
Yes, we have two.
Just left. going.
And you'll give me this, somebody will give me the signal when it's
I
time
will.
to start.
I'll come up and I'll introduce you.
Okay.
All right, welcome back, folks. Thanks so much. We gave you a DC 5 minutes, which is like 15, so. But welcome back. We're going to turn our attention now to our first panel and discuss economic development at the state level. Leading this conversation today is our moderator and the Vice President and Executive Director of WorkRise at the Urban Institute, Todd Green. Todd is joined by Carolina Martinez, CEO of Cameo, Inez Long, President and CEO of Black Business Investment Fund, and Wendy Bauman, President and Chief Visionary Officer at Wisconsin Women's Business Initiative Corporation. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for being here. Todd, pleasure.
Well, good afternoon. It's such a pleasure to be here, particularly to be on stage with such a power panel of incredibly amazing women who are doing some great things in their state and leading organizations that are really having impact. But I want to just maybe take a moment to just follow up more on the Assistant Secretary's remarks in the sense that EDA is really doing some amazing things. And I really like the idea of how the Assistant Secretary is bringing these very big national ideas like around democracy and how often do we hear about e pluribus unum when we think about our work, but really to be able to bring that down to a local level, to really think about those impacts and what does that mean for our communities, what does that mean for our small businesses, and what opportunities are being created. So just that ability to do that, I think is really powerful and an opportunity that I think that we should take advantage of. I also want to just take a point to say congratulations to Natalie. This organization is so important right now, more than ever, and certainly to have someone at the helm who's in a position to take AEO to the next level to support the important work. So congratulations to her. And then finally, I'll just say I'm no stranger to this organization. Certainly, I've been around AEO in previous positions and having opportunities to see it work and grow. And now in my position at the Urban Institute, where I lead WorkRise, I'm very excited to be a partner and to support AEO in helping to fund research that we're helping to support on workers and how small businesses can support worker mobility around some of employer practices, et cetera. So that's really exciting. So I want to move into this really important discussion about, we've heard kind of at a national level, and then when we know the work that we do and the impact, it really has to happen at a more local level. They talked about regionalism, and I want to maybe bring it down a little bit, another level, to really bring it to the state level. So we know that every state has differences in terms of its geography, its industries that are represented there, its politics. Let's get reasonable, realistic to understand it. Even those types of things make a difference. And even the share of employment in small businesses, the characteristics of them. And so, but yet there are still lessons that we can learn from one another, regardless of our context. So that's really the stage that I want to set by hearing a little bit from our organizations as we drill down into a couple of really important conversations that I know are front and center for each of you. So why don't we start with you, Carolina, just to tell us a little bit about you and your organization.
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Really excited to be here.
So I'm Carolina Martinez. I'm the CEO of Cameo. And we are a very unique organization. This is part of an initiative, actually, AEO spearheaded like over 30 years ago to have statewide micro-enterprise associations that would really kind of encourage and foster that collaboration between nonprofit organizations serving small businesses. This is our 30th anniversary this year, and we've grown from a few women-owned organizations, maybe 10, 15, to over 400 member organizations right now that count the small business development centers, women's business centers, independent nonprofits, and micro lenders and CDFIs. The majority of them are in California, but we also have several organizations from outside of the country. I'm personally my background is in business consulting. I've been working with small businesses for over 15 years in my original Colombia, but also in Pennsylvania and now in California. And my main focus was to really understand how we could bring that, we could build that ecosystem of support for those underserved entrepreneurs. What I very early on realized was that the nonprofits helping these small businesses were not able to find resources to really build their own capacity, right? So we were trying to provide them with all this capital or coaching or technical assistance, and it's really hard to find funding to prepare your own staff and to build your own capacity. So what Cameo does is really that, provide that layer of support. We've been really focusing in 3 pillars. One is capacity building, so a lot of professional development that we currently have with our CDFI Academy as well as our Business Coaching Academy, really building that professional development efforts. And the second pillar is advocacy. We do a lot of education about what the needs of the small businesses are and the needs of our member organizations as well. And the third one is ecosystem building. How could we really help to connect the dots, help you find other organizations, partner between yourselves to really provide better, more innovative, and more accurate programs and services to the small businesses.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Inez Long. I'm President CEO of Black Business Investment Fund. We call it BBIF, headquartered in Orlando, Florida. 35-year-old CDFI, Community Development Financial Institution. We have offices in Miami, Jacksonville, and Tampa, and soon to have an office in Atlanta, Georgia. We specialize in providing small business loans from as small as $10,000 to as much as $2 million. We also work in the new market tax credit space, where we have invested over $200 million in projects in Florida as well as in Georgia. We work very closely to provide capital and also to educate business people. We call it financial technical assistance, teaching financial literacy and helping to educate businesses to scale up. That is our specialty. And it's a pleasure being here. Thank you.
Good, and good afternoon. I'm Wendy Bauman. And we have to squint because those lights are so bright, just so you know. So I can't see everybody in the audience. We can't see anybody. So first I want to share an AEO story. Literally 30 years ago, I've been at WIBIC as president 30 years this year. So that's great. And 30 years ago, a little bit. And 30 years ago, my first office was in the lower level, i.e. the basement of this mansion in the heart of Milwaukee. And it was all good because I was excited to be at WIBIC. And I get a call from Connie Evans. At the time, she was executive director of WESEP, Women's Self-Employment Program, out of Chicago. She goes, I heard you the new lead there at WIBIC, so you need to join AEO. I didn't even know how to spell AEO, right? But like, whoa, someone's calling me, first of all, know that I'm the new head. And I said, absolutely, Connie, I'm going to join AEO. Tell me more about it. So for 30 years, WIBIC has been a strong member of AEO and has tried to be supportive and part of its fabric. I served on the board for 2 terms, and actually when I was on the board is when we hired Connie Evans as the previous executive director. And now we're really thrilled. The little I know of Natalie, I think great things, so excited for her to take it, not even to the next level, but to a new level. It's not necessarily about being better, but about being different and responding to the needs that we have right now with AEO. So we will always remain a member of AEO, and I'm sure many of you are too. So in terms of WIBIC, our organization's about 37 years old. We are statewide, just about to open actually our 6th regional office in way, way, way north Wisconsin, actually in partnership with the Native American community. So we're really excited about that with the new funded Women's Business Center. We came out of the women's economic empowerment movement and out of the microlending movement. So from day one, we were providing what we call now quality financial and business training, and then access to fair and responsible capital. So we've grown that. Our first loans were up to $10,000. You know, when I came on 30 years ago, our operational budget was $250,000. I thought that was a lot of money. And now our operational budget's about $9 million, and a loan portfolio peaking $28 million, about 750 active loans. We still are totally a microlender at heart. Our loans go from 1,000 to 350, but our sweet spot is under 150. And we also are actively involved in training and technical assistance. Last year, over 5,200 really unduplicated entrepreneurs and business owners came to training on ground, online, hybrid, virtual, to learn about thinking about starting that business, about business planning, about acceleration, perhaps struggling in business and needing more help and rigor around cash flow and marketing. Care about everybody, focus on women, people of color, lower wealth, and veterans and military-connected families. And if we look at our numbers last year, 92% of our clients in Greater Milwaukee were people of color, about 65% statewide, 70% women, about 70% low and moderate income. So really keeping that focus on the mission of our work where there is great promise.
Great. It's really captivating to hear all about the important work that you've been doing, but not just starting yesterday. You've been at this for a long time. So you know a lot about the opportunities, and you've seen different trends come and go, I'm sure, over time. And I maybe want to first begin by talking a bit about two important themes and how they play out for small businesses, and specifically how they work at your state and the state level and what you're seeing. And the first has to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then maybe the second one has to do with ESG. So in both of those categories, we've seen a lot evolve, a lot has changed over the last couple of years, in some cases in different ways in different states, and the appetite may be changing as well. So I'm curious about, are there themes that you're seeing in your state, in your context, around these topics as they apply to the small businesses that you serve? And is this a passing fad, or do you think that this is sustainable? And then how can businesses really take advantage of this? So would you like to go first?
Sure. Well, California is such a diverse state. So, and I think just nationwide, the small business, especially owned by minority communities, have been there. We see a lot of like the immigrant interest and desire to start their own business as part of the American dream, right? So with California, we recently have a study saying that like 46% of all businesses in California are owned by people of color. So, and when we talk is different from other states, we definitely discuss the idea of like, okay, here is mostly one community. In California, we have such a wide variety. So we have a significant number of Asian-owned businesses, Hispanic-owned businesses, and Black and African-American-owned businesses, as Native. So it is a wide range of what a community of color is. But we are seeing the impact of it. So I don't think it's necessarily that the small businesses owned by people of color are a new trend. I think it's just that we've come to realize, especially after the pandemic, that how important those businesses are to the economy. That they are actually living and facing systemic barriers to access the resources they need to grow. So I think one of the things that we really talk a lot during the pandemic was, or before the pandemic, was how a lot of the programs we have were the best kept secret. And sometimes it felt like a moment of pride of like, we're providing this and we're a secret. And I think that secret just disappeared through the pandemic because we were really highlighting the challenges that these small businesses have, the challenges that they face every day to access capital and to access the resources they need to grow. So, and we are seeing that the communities of color really were impacted by the pandemic, right? So a lot of layoffs, a lot of people that were not able to work from home, and it was mentioned before. So what other option exists than start their own business? That's something in the back of their minds. So we are seeing this historic boom, and the majority of it is being led by minority-owned businesses and peoples in how it's called now, in socially and economic disadvantaged communities, right? So we are definitely seeing that everything that we were experiencing before is just coming to light more.
So, Inez, you're in Florida, which obviously has been the epicenter of a lot of these issues related to DE&I and as well as ESG. So I'm wondering, how do you see it from Florida, and what opportunities are being created for small businesses as a result of these particular policies?
Excellent question, because as you all know, in Florida, our leader, our governor, has outlawed DEI as well as ESG investments and all of that stuff. So what I've observed and what I have actively participated in is that I think regionality becomes extremely important. You know, getting very close to partners that have a regional focus, because in spite of what the state may be doing, there are private companies that still want to support minority firms. And so, you know, the debate in rooms are, okay, so you're not really caring that the state really doesn't want to certify women-owned firms or minority-owned firms. We're okay as a contractor. We're still going to use those certifications, and we're still going to work with those businesses in contract opportunities. I'm very pleasantly surprised that there are people, lots of people, that feel this way in regards to funding partners, investors that are national and regional, that still want to work to help those communities out. So I guess politics is about a time span, and hopefully that time will pass. But yes, it gets a whole lot of media attention, you know, and it's just the reality of what's going on in Florida, unfortunately.
And Wendy, you know, if you could take a crack at that same one, but I know that in Wisconsin, you talked about having an office in the north of Wisconsin. I know all of the states, every state that we have has a rural portion, and they also have an urban portion. So I'm just curious about what you're seeing in Wisconsin and how these issues are playing out, and if you could speak to, are there rural-urban divides and opportunities that you see?
Yeah, a couple things. I feel for Inez. I mean, Florida and Texas. Oh my goodness, right? So a couple things, the good, the bad, and ugly. You know, when certain moments hit in the United States, and every CEO of a bank and corporation had to put out his or her statement, right? There was that week. Everybody had to put it out. DEI, you know, all of it. I just going like, yeah, okay. And so then all these people at corporations got hired to be the chief czar of DEI, and I'm going, okay, but I'm gonna go with the good. They're gonna open the door perhaps more. They'll maybe contact us more to look at, you know, businesses. They'll maybe think about things more. They'll maybe read a little bit of research more. So maybe good, but as we can see, what happened was this big flood, this big piece, this big comments, and then it goes back to other things. Because of what? I don't know. So I'm just like laying that out just as a general statement. It saddens me. But I predicted it, you know, as many others did too. It's like the flavor of the day and running for something as opposed to really, again, building it into the culture of an organization. Even a couple of my team members, 65 staff, like, well, Wendy, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? You know, these are 3 new letters that corporate America all of a sudden discovered. We discovered it 37 years ago about the importance of equity and inclusion. And yeah, and you know, we have to put a statement out. I go, I'm not putting a statement out. You know, this is what we've done since day one. Look at our numbers, look at our impact, look at who we care about, look at what we do. You know, we stand for ourselves. So that was, you know, just that a little bit. But I had to say that because I think sometimes we have to say things like that.
Absolutely.
In terms of Wisconsin, a couple good things. Our state government is a great governor. He happens to be a Democrat and really, really good, but he really has stood to the table. So he garnered some of the ARPA dollars, and he made a commitment of $50 million. That's pretty much to go to CDFIs and minority chambers. That was a lot of money that came into those groups for building infrastructure, for lending and support, and so on. So I really appreciate that. That was the good. And with that, many of those minority chambers and organizations like us too do handle both that urban and rural piece of things. Some of it was specifically around diversity, but most of it was around where there's an equity. So there was sort of this, they did dance, the state did dance a little bit. It didn't have to be minority, didn't have to be women, didn't have to be this, but we all knew that we were going to use that money for that. So it didn't really matter, but legally on the contract it didn't say that, and legally we didn't have to abide by that, but these are all good people that have been around for a long time, so you play a little bit the game, but you make it for goodness. But he didn't have to do that. Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, Department of Administration didn't have to do that, so that was a big plus for that aspect of things. A bank I'll leave unnamed, very supportive and very good, gave us some funding specifically for a program. And we called the program Black Business Boost. So over 3 years, blew away the numbers, providing equity injection into startup black businesses, providing coverage and support for accelerators and training, provided third-party support for credit recovery and repair, and provided training support. Great program. We're supposed to serve 100 individuals. They said 100. I'm going like, I can serve 100 in a couple months. But I go, okay, I'll just serve 100. Blow away your goals. So we ended up really touching 850 people and seriously working with 350 to 400 over that 3-year period. Blew it away. So of course I go knocking a year and a half into it for more money. We'll see. So finally, like I bugged them enough, the national people and the local people, okay already. And so we received 400,000 of pretty much committed support as opposed to 600. But they said, but Wendy, you don't have to continue to name the program Black Business Boost. We wanted to provide just to the good work that you do. So to me, that was just very interesting because before they were wrapping themselves in Black Business Boost and now like, oh, it's okay, just do the good work that you do. We know you're gonna do good work. So those are realities.
Yeah, thank you for that and shouting out what's working. I want to transition the topic to something that everybody in the room cares about, and this has been an age-old topic, and that is access to capital for small business. We heard the Assistant Secretary talk quite a bit about some amazing programs that the federal government came out with, but what I'd like to turn to is what's happening in your state with access to capital. Are there new trends? Are there new opportunities? Are there some programs that might be unique to your state that others might be able to benefit from? And let's also talk, let's have a real conversation and talk about what's worked, and everything doesn't always work, so let's also talk about what hasn't worked. So Inez, why don't we start with you on this one?
So access to capital, we've been very successful in raising capital, basically because we just put so much out into the marketplace, and it has allowed for us to partner with many organizations, primarily organizations that are not Florida-based, organizations that are based outside of Florida. Because of the politics that exist in Florida, it has not stopped our energy. It hasn't stopped the way we've been able to raise money and invest money within the community, which is very important to small and minority businesses. You know, for instance, during the pandemic, we were able to get investors to allow for us to receive millions of dollars that we gave back to the businesses as equity that kept them alive, during the pandemic. We worked with many governments, local governments within the state to reallocate millions of dollars in grant dollars to the community. So we've done a lot of work in Florida. You got to understand Florida. So you got the state government, but then you have local governments as well. All local governments are not in sync with the state government. So those local governments are aggressive and progressive in regards to working with us and CDFIs such as ours to help get capital into the community, as are many private investors. So we still function inside of this whole bubble of all of this negativity that goes on. And that's important because business people need that money. We are a CDFI, excuse me, have somewhat of a sinus thing going on here. We're a CDFI that survey our customers, really try to understand what their needs are, and then we create lending programs to support those needs. That's how we do our work. And that's why we have so many different programs and opportunities that specialize for certain industries with businesses and that sort of thing, because it's very, very important that these businesses have access to capital, have an understanding of what they need to know in order to successfully get capital. We have a very, very aggressive technical assistance program. So for those businesses that we can't help today, we don't like to tell businesses, no, we can't provide you capital. What we say is, we can't do it today. However, you work with this team over here, you do some things, and then you come back, and perhaps we can help you then.
So here, like obviously we've been very privileged in California to have a very supportive government that is really looking for solutions to help the small businesses. So from Cameo, we always talk about the 5 C's. And it's not the 5 C's of credit, but it's really the 5 C's of ecosystem building, right? So we talk about capital, which is kind of what the small businesses always go first, but that it doesn't come alone, right? We need coaching, we need the connections to the markets, we need a culture that really supports a small business, and we need a climate, a political climate that really allows them and facilitates the life of the small businesses. So I think in California, we've been really working into these 5 C's to support the small businesses. So the state actually has been putting significant amounts of funding to help small businesses. Throughout the pandemic, they actually deployed over $4 billion in grants to small business in the California Relief Grant. And that was the first attempt to really mobilize all the network of organizations that are supporting entrepreneurs. So that was very exciting to kind of get all the partners engaged for the first time and really connecting to bringing the word out to the small businesses. Because when we talk about the low-income communities or immigrant communities, it is really not, they not always find out about these opportunities the same way that the regular communities, right? With this relief grant, we put so much outreach, and sometimes when the funding was almost over, they were just starting to hear about it. So just bringing and understanding how to approach the small business is important. Then we were part of another initiative called the California Rebuilding Fund, which was a partnership between the state, the nonprofit sector, and the philanthropic partners. And that really leveraged something that everybody's hearing lately, the State Small Business Credit Initiative, SSBCI. We did have the loan guarantee program, so we leveraged that to really deploy more capital to the small businesses. But that was fully capital access. And now that SSBCI 2.0 is out, the state is really interested in deploying. As you probably heard, California got $1.2 billion to deploy through this loan guarantee program and loan participation and loan loss reserve program. And funny enough, we didn't get that much for technical assistance, but we got funding. The state got $25 million. Cameo was named as the network manager for this. And what makes this so innovative is that this program really builds that ecosystem to provide the technical assistance to the small business that is gonna make them capital ready. So when we were talking about, like, it's not only capital, sometimes they come for capital and they're not ready, right? So Ines was looking that you need to refer them somewhere. So that is the network and the ecosystem we're building to make sure that they are totally capital ready, and we are streamlining the process to the lender. So we're definitely very innovative. We love to try and pilot initiatives to see how they can work. Obviously, it's not easy. I mean, just this program has at least 55 organizations participating. So that brings a lot of challenges. On top of that, it actually involves 3 different agencies within the state, right? So all of that brings different challenges, but that obviously I would love to talk, but it is really exciting to see that at least we're willing to try, that we are conscious that the small businesses that we're looking to serve are not able to access the capital, and even if they find out about how to get it, the statistics tell us nationwide that they don't get the full amount of funding they ask for. So we know how many of these barriers we need to kind of overcome to really help build these communities. So we're really excited about these things in California right now.
So I just wanted to just share with the audience, because I think we should do that. A couple of programs that we did about trying to fill a gap of what was needed was we worked with a local small city within the Orange County community that had this problem, and the problem was they had never invested in the part of their community which was a minority community, Black community, and they had this issue where folks were very, very poor. They had substandard housing. So what we worked with them to do was to develop a legacy fund. And from that legacy fund, what they did was they invested $7 million. And what we did is we structured a program for them where we would hire minority contractors to go in and renovate folks' homes and bring the homes up to a living standard that they could be proud of. Another situation that we did was in South Florida with the city of Miami. They have a terrible problem of needing affordable housing down there. So we worked with them to develop a program where they invested initially $7 million in the first year. Our role was to administer the program and find small developers of color, because a part of the issue is that you have these lots that are within the minority community that are not being utilized, that could be developed into affordable housing. So in the first 6 months of this program, we were able to invest the entire $7 million. What we got out of it is we got 12 brand new affordable houses and 24 brand new affordable townhouses out of those funds. So we try and do things like that. We listen to what the needs are and work to help solve the issue that are in communities. That is how our CDFI works, to try and help bring capital into spaces where it does not exist.
I really love that kind of innovation part and your role in helping to craft a solution to a problem and bringing the small businesses in. So Wendy, I'd really like to build off of that, because I know in Wisconsin you all have many similar programs that they may operate somewhat differently. And so I'd be interested in hearing if there's anything new that you'd like to add. But really, I'm also interested in, particularly given your experience in the field, how are you feeling about things? Are you feeling positive about what's to come? We heard the Assistant Secretary talk about many of these programs that work, unfortunately have a sunset or a limited set of funding, so we may see we've invested in many programs that are successful, but yet we're not sure that they're going to continue. So give us your thoughts about some of that.
First, real quick on the access to capital, what I'm seeing over the past, especially since really economic crisis and COVID, is I believe even a greater collaboration with mission lenders and CDFIs. So not like we weren't collaborating before, but even a greater need to collaborate because it was such stress with our clients. Like, hey, you do half of this deal, I'll do half of this deal. Hey, you go up to 150, we can only go up to 25, could you do the other part? So a lot more referral, a lot more working together. And part of it too is that it's really helpful if leaders and executive directors stay on, because you can develop a relationship and keep going. So that's one. Second, I used to say for pre-COVID, for 27 years, grants and business don't mix. And then everything happened. And so now the use of grants, again, everybody ran around, and they needed grants. Yeah. I mean, it was a need to save our economy and our world, and now they've dried up. But I still see a little role for grants in the piece. And my piece with that is, you know, banks box is this big, and then our CDFI box is this big. But if I could have a little bit of equity injection into the deal, I could make a bigger box.
Yeah.
And it works. And it doesn't matter what color people are, it's a low and moderate income piece, urban or rural. That I have this good business idea, I have a good business plan, I don't have the $5,000 or $10,000 to put in the deal. And as CDFIs and mission lenders, we need something into the deal to make it work. So being able to have that pot of money to put it in, to leverage our capital. So it's really not a grant, it's an equity injection to allow us to do the lending. And I'm chasing after more money like that and trying to make the case. And then my third piece would be, and then I'll answer your question. And then my third piece was your first question. I want to answer it. And my third piece would be Kiva. So everybody's familiar with Kiva? Crowdsourcing only for small businesses, 0%, co-founder PayPal, co-founder of Kiva. It is still an underutilized financing source in this country and in this world. And I'm big on Kiva. I'm the Kiva advisory board. I think I'm going to work for Kiva someday, but I love Kiva. So we've done millions of dollars of Kiva loans that are all part of our world. I still get them into our training. I get them first a Kiva loan, and then they get a WIBIC loan. It's a great piece on that ladder of capital. And the beauty of that business owner to realize that people from all around the world are lending that business owner $25 at 0% interest is also, I think, a social blessing and goodness around the program. So I just wanted to make a commercial on Kiva. I think it is part of the financing structure. They do go up to $15,000 now. It really fits into that micro-lending world.
I'm going to, I don't know if we'll have time for an audience question or two. I'm hoping that we will. So maybe I'll just ask the first one as others prepare their questions, and that is workers. Small businesses employ a lot of workers, and I think there are certainly opportunities for many workers who are in small business. Many of them go work at bigger businesses, and so workforce, this seems to be such a vexing challenge of our time. What opportunities have emerged, but also how are we treating our workers? Are we treating them with dignity and respect, et cetera? And so certainly there are opportunities for small businesses and big businesses to play in that. But I'm just curious about the role of workers, as you see in small businesses in terms of shortages or opportunities. Are there anything, have you seen anything that has worked well to support workers, or are there opportunities or challenges that you'd like to kind of uncover in the future?
I'll start with that one. So we have worked with a number of our clients around this issue. We have raised funds to support them to elevate the pay and benefits for their employees. We're also, we have this program where we work with minority contractors. And around that, what we do is we place interns into their businesses, because what you find is many small contractors like that, it's just them. That's the problem. And they don't have the equity to hire staff. So we found that if we can put interns into their businesses as a part of our technical assistance team, then we can bring some capacity within their firms. But of course, that's something that has to be supported by funders. But that's the work that we've done to really help around that issue.
I would say for us is human resources in general is a big challenge for not only the small businesses, but the organizations in our network. As much as we were super excited about everything that goes on in California, I'm pretty sure everybody knows the cost of living in California. So being able to actually provide a living wage in our state is a significant challenge. Yeah. And on top of that, we have one of the most regulated human resources in the country. So it is definitely a concern, and we've been really discussing a lot about how that could be included, how could we provide support to everybody to really understand how the process of hiring goes. There is a lot of interest in good jobs We have few members really focusing on that, on supporting and guiding the small businesses into having their first hires, or what do you have to have in place, and how could you guarantee the sustainability of those positions. So definitely finding that those challenges, I think, is going to be a part of the next iteration of support that we need to provide. And I'd like to really reiterate the challenge in the nonprofit world. Like, I think that was mentioned before, that our organizations are also small businesses, and hiring people for the nonprofit sector when it is a challenge, in the for-profit sector, again, it is a hard thing. We've been hearing a lot of layoffs in California from tech companies, right? So there is an opportunity, but again, we cannot afford the salaries that they're looking for. So definitely a challenge. I remember an AEO study research many years ago about that if any micro business would hire 1 to 3 people, we would be full. Somebody's remembering here. It is we would be in full employment in the country, and I think that is the impact that we could have. So we should definitely be talking more and more about the challenges.
Yeah, going off to your question, I have this expression, I love humanity, it's people that give me pause. So, related to our own staff and team sometimes. We don't do enough, and I don't know we're going to at WIBIC to support the workforce issue. What we do is when we ask questions of the client, have you thought through workforce? Where are you going to get your employees? We have issues, what are you doing? So we want to see that they've fleshed out their thoughts and their ideas around it, but we don't really support that like another organization. It's really on that business piece.
It's really hard, I think, to connect the issues between what a small business is doing every day and, like you talked about creating a quality job and making sure that you're adhering to all of the resources that and regulations that a small business has to adhere to. I'll just mention that WorkRise at the Urban Institute, we recently published a piece that deals with how the city of Minneapolis has worked collaboratively with small businesses to create an environment that is not punitive, but actually helps to support the small businesses so that they can do good for their workers as well. So I encourage you to take a look at that. So we do have a minute or two for questions or comments from the audience, and there may be a couple, so if you don't mind keeping it brief, that would be great. And so I see we have one here, and if there are others, I can't see you, so sorry.
That's why I stand up, because I'm a little short, so I don't want you to see me. Good afternoon. I'm Kimberly Gale from the Washington Area Community Investment Fund. We are also a CDFI locally in the DMV area. My question is regards to the Greenhouse Gas Fund, Reduction Fund. Have any of you all prepared to participate or do anything for your entrepreneurs in the green space, green lending, or anything sustainability-wise? Have you had any activities that you are currently doing or in the future plan on doing?
Yeah, just brief, we're reading up on it. Our governor put together a commission, and one of our team members serves on that commission to help frame and also to sit at the table that we will not forget about the small businesses in Wisconsin when those fund dollars come through that are really going to be significant.
We've surveyed our customer base, and we have worked with some of the businesses that are in the construction industry in regards to the sort of work that they do in regards to energy efficiency and all of that stuff, getting them prepped for the opportunities, or getting our CDFI prepped for the opportunities to bring that capital into the market.
Yeah, and in our case, we're definitely tracking that. A lot of our members and partners have been already engaged in some of the coalitions that got some of the funding that was announced a couple of weeks ago. So we're definitely tracking that. Some of the concerns we have is a handful of members actually of CDFIs have already developed a green loan product. It's really not common, and I think the majority of the initiatives on this area are going into housing or on those organizations that actually own property. For the smaller businesses that are the ones that we work with, so the majority of them don't own any property, right? So we're trying to really be more conscious about it. There is an interest into discussing procurement as an opportunity to kind of become subcontractors of some of those major prime contractors to do some contracting. And sorry, I lost track. And I'm running out of time and I lost track of what I was saying. But we're also looking into how we can train the CDFIs into developing these green and climate resiliency initiatives and products, because that's the other piece. As CDFIs, we might not be completely aware of how to develop these kind of products, so there is a professional development component to it.
Okay. And I think we have one more quick question here.
Good afternoon. My name is Melanie Seymour. I'm with the Institute for Entrepreneurial Leadership. We're based in Newark, New Jersey, EIFEL for short. We're a nonprofit organization that supports wealth generation through small business ownership for historically excluded populations. My question, actually first a comment, we do leverage Kiva. I would like to talk to you later. And just as a program that we do, we find that when individuals are interested in donating money towards the work that we do, we leverage Kiva and take that money and then accelerate their crowdfunding element of it. So if they have a $10,000 loan, we will post $5,000, and then it accelerates the speed of that 0% loan. So that's just something to share as like one way to activate the community of individuals that care about the work that we're doing. Secondly, my question was, you mentioned an injection of equity, and we work with angel investment for some of our clients who are looking to grow, scale, and exit. We work with folks who are looking to become angel investors and training them. So when I hear equity, I think about an exit, but I'm not sure if that was the context you were using it in, and I just wanted you to drill down a little bit in what you meant by equity infusion, by whom, and how does that work? Because I don't think it was related to your Kiva comment.
Right, it wasn't. Okay, so we've pooled money specifically in proposals at this point from two private foundations. So hundreds of thousands of dollars, we've pooled it. And so we up to $5,000 to $10,000 we will put in a loan that is again going to be low and moderate income, because that business owner, entrepreneur business owner, does not have some of his or her own equity to put into the deal that we'd like to see. We're not strict, but we need some skin in the game. And so when we're looking at that proposal for that $50,000 loan, $100,000 loan, we know we have this pot of money, so we're able to get to yes for that credit more. So we call it a WIBIC equity infusion, funded right now by two foundations. But I'd like to grow that pool to be able to do more of that, because again, I think we can do then more good, solid lending, but what's lacking there is not the will, not the individual, not the idea, not the business plan, is that they don't have the equity to put in that deal. So we're coming up with that. Sure.
So we are going to move into a speed round here. And that is, if there is one thing that you want to leave the audience that's in the room and audiences who might be viewing this today and later, what's that one thing that you want to leave them or suggest that they do or not do? And why don't we start with you, Caroline?
Sure. I'm going to go with two, and quickly, hopefully. One is listen to your communities. I think they are really the ones that are going to tell you what their needs are and how to solve those issues, so that is a big one. And the second is make sure that you're always sharing or learning from best practices. Sometimes we're doing the same thing either in the regions or throughout the state or in other states, and sometimes what the others have done could help you. So sharing of best practices.
I would say the biggest thing for serving the community, the underserved community, is one, really understanding what your customer needs are. I think it's important for us in this work to always survey our customers. And once you do that, then be creative and innovative in the programming that you bring to them. It doesn't have to be done in the same way in which it was done 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. You can be very, very creative in the way you invest dollars into business owners. Those would be the two things that I would say.
I like that. I would add pilot things, because you can pilot things and then you can totally screw up and you can say it was a pilot, right? It's a good way to go in and out. Or you can pilot things and go, okay, and now I'm going to not make it a model, I'm going to make it a framework and adjust it and mold it to really permanency, so pilot things. And then my favorite closing expressions are, do what you can with what you got, where you can go, and then borrowing from Nike, just do it.
All right. right.
good.
Such sage pieces of advice from all three. Please join me in thanking Carolina, Inez, and Wendy.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Todd, for leading that discussion. Another round of applause for this wonderful panel. Such great inspirational words, and we really appreciate it. Oh, I'm told to keep talking, so please feel free to take pictures if you'd like. They're here all day. All right, one more. All right, thank you again. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. All right, we're going to keep the conversation rolling right into our next panel. So I'd ask the panelists to make your way up here on stage. If you are in there, there, look at that. Gathered and ready to go. Excellent. So our next panel, we're going to be discussing economic development at the local level. Nope, we need one more chair?
I can stand down here.
We'll need one more chair. Thank you. All right, we probably should have taken a break. Here. Play some musical chairs here. There we go. Okay. There we go. I have one over here for you. All right, here we are. Thank you so much, panelists, for making your way so efficiently up on stage. Really appreciate that. We're going to get started here with a conversation around local economic development. This panel is led by Allison Evans, who is the, let's see if I get this right, Local Economic Development Entrepreneurship Ecosystem Development Specialist at U.S. Small Business Administration. She's joined by Brianne Maynor, President of Startup Sioux Falls, Daniel Flores, Vice President of Government Relations at the Greater Washington Board of Trade, John Lewis, CEO of Harbor Bank of Maryland, and Josephine Panzera, Executive Director of Start Small, Think Big. Thank you all for joining us, and Allison, over to you.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. How's everyone doing? Good. Well, I think we already demonstrated what this panel is all about, and that's that we persist in the face of challenges. So thank you for the quick furniture reorganization. First of all, huge thank you to AEO for bringing us all together. I think one thing that we can all relate to is that this work is not easy. It's hard. Some days we go home, our head is hanging a little lower than we'd want it to. But it's always in these moments that we can come together that I feel a little bit more energized and incredibly excited to learn from this panel and learn from all of you as well. My name is Allison Evans. I'm an Entrepreneurship Ecosystem Development Specialist with the U.S. Small Business Administration's Office of Investment and Innovation. What does that all mean? Our office is focused on supporting technology entrepreneurs and high-growth small businesses, and in that work, I happily manage our Regional Innovation Cluster Initiative, which is focused on providing funding to regional coalitions to support small businesses and to conduct ecosystem building and build partnerships in their local communities. So I would now love to hand it over to our panelists to do brief introductions, talk about yourself, your organization, and also the community in which you work in.
Great, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Lewis. I'm the President and Chief Executive Officer of Harbor Bankshares Corporation. Harbor Bankshares Corporation is a bank holding company headquartered in Baltimore, Maryland. Our principal subsidiary is the Harbor Bank of Maryland. The Harbor Bank of Maryland is one of 25 Maryland chartered banks, one of 2 community banks, commercial banks headquartered in Baltimore City, and has the distinction of being the only MDI in the state of Maryland. Our bona fides in that business, our target markets are low-income communities and African Americans. Last year, 88% of our loans by number went to those target markets, and 82% by dollar amount went to those target markets. Our firm is 42 years old, right? Always looking on a demand basis to serve the needs of communities as these communities express those needs. So 42 years on, it really is a special institution created to serve specifically underserved and under-resourced communities. So in addition to our bank, which is a CDFI, our holding company is a CDFI and one of the leading allocatees in new market tax credits, and also emerging in the space of providing private credit and private equity. We also have a community development corporation, which is our third certified CDFI, which looks more traditional like the loan funds that we see across the country, but also engages intentionally in economic development and capital provision across the capital structure. Great to be here with you today.
Daniel Flores with the Greater Washington Board of Trade. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak on this very important topic. Welcome everybody to Washington, D.C., and if you haven't, please go spend money. We'd love that. And I'll be glad to tell you where to go to either use a restaurant or Uber, etc. The Greater Washington Board of Trade was created just down the street in 1889. We've been around for a little bit, and we're a leading organization on regional issues where we work with elected officials, we work with universities, colleges, nonprofit organizations, a lot of folks around DC, Maryland, and Virginia, and Capitol Hill, because we have representatives in Virginia and in Maryland that work on policy issues related to this region that are very important to us. Some of the issues that we talked about or work on is transportation, infrastructure, economic development, education, and nowadays is technology with AI and machine learning. As you know, all these things are very important not only to large companies, but small companies also, because employees need to be close to where they work. But we also have to have important, is that my time? We have to have access to transportation. Been with the Board of Trade for 16 years. Prior to that, I was with the Greater Washington Board of Trade as the president and CEO, but also worked with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. So I've been in this space for quite a bit, and what I've heard from the other panel is a lot to what I've heard in the past, and I know that the pandemic has changed things a bit, but we will get into that later on. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. It's really exciting to be here in DC. I showed my 4-year-old where I was going on a map, and he absolutely thinks that I'm speaking at the White House today, so we're just going to keep that myth going. My name is Jo Panzera. I'm the executive director of a nonprofit called Start Small, Think Big. We will be celebrating our 15th anniversary next year. We're an organization, excuse me, that's based, we're headquartered in New York, but really work across the US, but very intentionally focus on New York and California. The work that we do is really looking at how we can support small businesses to overcome a lot of the barriers and challenges that they face by connecting them to the support that they need in the form of a volunteer. We work with a lot of different for-profit corporations that provide somewhere between about 2,500 and 3,000 volunteers for us each year to really work alongside those small businesses and help them address a variety of different needs. We have 3 programs, a legal program, a finance program, and a marketing and sales program. And over the course of a year, we will serve just under 3,500 small businesses through a range of different services.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Brian Maynor. I am the president of Startup Sioux Falls. Our organization has been in existence for over 20 years, and we have reinvented ourselves several times. But basically what we do, and we say it very succinctly, is we empower founders, because we don't like to say entrepreneur because that's too many syllables. We empower founders and we ignite innovation in the greater Sioux Falls area. So I am from the great state of South Dakota, and I live in the purple city of Sioux Falls, which I'm very proud to represent today. Some of the things that we do as an organization, we were a recipient, a Tier 3 recipient of the Community Navigator Pilot Program grant through the SBA, and that has been a catalyst for an incredible amount of change, impact, and possibility for our part of the world. In addition, we run a co-working space. We have meeting room space in the heart of our city in downtown Sioux Falls. And we empower founders through our different programs that we provide, such as an accelerator program, a mentor network, an EIR program, and lots of other things. So just really happy to be here. I have a 6-year-old daughter, and she probably also thinks that I'm at the White House today, so your secret's safe with me. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so if anyone asks, where are we today?
The White House.
White House.
We have to make sure their kids don't find out. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for those wonderful introductions. I wanted to start off with a little bit of a definition. I think we've all been using this word, but I want to make sure we all know why we're using it, and that's the word ecosystem. So within our office, we have the definition of that as simply an interconnected set of actors. Could be individuals, could be organizations, but I would say those organizational types are all represented on this panel. So our capital allocators, those local or state economic development organizations, and also our entrepreneur support organizations. So John and Daniel, I want to start with you, and then Joe and Brianne, I'll come to you as well with a little bit of an altered question. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the regional economic development strategy for your region, and then how do your respective organizations play into that? So John?
I guess so. So first, let's talk about region, right? So we heard the term DMV used earlier today, right? DMV being DC, Maryland, and Virginia. So I grew up outside of Buffalo, New York, and when I got to Baltimore, where we're headquartered, it was a surprise to me that Baltimore is not considered, nor does it consider itself to be part of the DMV, right? So one of the great things that you're seeing, though, is that there is a real discussion around regionalism, and it's focused in a few different ways in terms of integration, right? There's a larger discussion happening about essentially the DMV, including Baltimore, looking something like a super city years from now, right? Like Chicagoland or the New York, New Jersey region, stretching all the way from Virginia Tech and Blacksburg all the way up to the northern suburbs of Baltimore. And that makes sense. But to do that, one of the focuses is that you've got to have regional transportation that works, that integrates, right? So that is an underpinning of some of the discussions that are happening. The work of the EDA had been talked about in some of the previous panels, and that has been great. It has done, over the last couple of years, something that I just had not seen in my time before, and that is real collaboration happening amongst institutions. So particularly one of the other focuses that we see right now is just technology, right? This is an area that is led by educational institutions and hospitals. Certainly you have technology being transferred and invested in by the federal government. All of that sits in this footprint and becomes an anchor for hopefully growth and activities happening in the future. Where our firm fits into all of this, and you know, I don't do panels like this all the time, but I do like doing them because we all know one of the gaps that often happens is we take kind of high thought and theory and policy, and it's not informed by what it looks like on the day-to-day by practitioners, right? At the end of the day, I spent my morning approving deals and pushing out term sheets. My job day-to-day is to take capital and to put it into people's hands, right? And there's an art to doing that, but it is what we do. And when we talk about the misses in terms of access to capital or inclusion, those things in many ways boil down to distribution. And distribution is incredibly complex in some ways because you've got to have trust between the parties with the capital and the parties receiving the capital to even make it a go. You've got to understand entrepreneurs and neighborhoods and communities before you get the right to actually engage them in providing capital. So that's where our organization fits in, and it's nice to talk about, you know, regionalism, because we're regional. Our regulatory footprint, which is where by regulatory guidance 85% of our loans must go, is Northern Virginia, DC, and Maryland. So the way that we fit into all of this is we are tactical, right? We make these high concepts real. We make capital available to entrepreneurs, but we also interface from a policy perspective, from, you know, a perspective of just having good ideas and practices and making sure that those are informed. And then lastly, advocating to make sure that these communities and entrepreneurs that we serve and we're familiar with are thought of and represented at the table and represented by an institution with the credibility to be able to make their voices heard.
Well, thank you. That's a great question, and appreciate your comments, John. The Greater Washington Board of Trade, as a leading organization around the region, continues to work with a lot of individuals and a lot of organizations and companies. As I mentioned before, we continue to work with every leader that we see out there that we can learn from one another, because the region, as you mentioned, Baltimore is right outside, but is still part of the region as it is Richmond. But transportation, as I mentioned earlier today, is very important to us, is how to get to and from, but at the same time, we have been pushing for the maglev to be developed and constructed here, but it still is something that it might take a little longer. It's not Japan or China where it gets built overnight. So we continue to work on a lot of different issues with Amtrak, with local trains, Metro, to make sure that we moved the workforce where it needs to be. But also, to your comment earlier about the Baltimore, we work with the Greater Washington Baltimore organization, with the Maryland Chamber of Commerce and other chambers of commerce from around the region, because they are the ones that are foot on the ground where they know what's going on in terms of policy-related issues that we need to be more involved with and make sure that we're ahead of the game, but where we can provide support and be able to step up to the game when it comes to either dealing with something that is happening in Richmond or in Baltimore or Annapolis. During session, as some of you might know, or some of you that are from out of here, session starts at the beginning of the year and is in Annapolis, in Maryland, and is in Richmond, in Virginia. And we have to be there. And also, we have to talk to the different elected officials that might not be from this region, but we either have to introduce them to what the region is about or what we do in order for them to be able to support or understand the work that we do here. So we continue to have those conversations, but also to maintain relationships where we can keep this region and create a quality of life for everybody, because we need the businesses, we need the employees, and as I mentioned before, with COVID and people working remotely has become a little bit of where you're working now. There is, numbers came up last week, I believe, where folks are moving to Frederick, Maryland, which is about an hour and a half from here, and folks are moving to Richmond, which is about two and a half hours from here. So all those things we have to keep into consideration as to what is it that we're doing to make sure that not only we have the workforce available, but also make sure that our roads and our public transportation is available for the people that we have in this region.
That was great. Thank you both. And I think interesting that everyone in this room, I'm sure, would espouse the strengths of regionalism, right? Allows us to build those partnerships, but not without its complications when kind of regions butt against each other. But so Joe and Brian, love to give you a similar question in terms of what is the role each of your respective organizations play in your economic development strategy, but also would love to hear from you as you're engaging directly with the small businesses and providing them services. What are some unique challenges that you've seen them encountering over the past few years, and how are you helping them navigate that? So Joe, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned, Start Small is a national provider, but we were founded in New York, headquarters there. Some people would say our heart and soul is still in New York, and so we focus a lot of our work on New York and then California in the Bay Area. And that when you look at those two areas, wherever we speak to small businesses, we hear the same needs, very similar business needs coming through. It's access to capital, we need reliable workforce, we need more support, more help. But there's different drivers of those business needs depending on where you are, and different things that make them more acute in each area that we work in. And so when we look at New York and and as well in the Bay Area, it's this incredible wealth disparity that we're seeing. In New York, I think it's something like the top 1% is earning 31% of the earnings in New York, and earns something like 44 times the other 99%. It's very similar in the Bay Area. I think DC might be up there on the podium for that as well. And so that sort of wealth disparity really just brings its own unique challenges. I think we heard on the last panel about just the cost of living, the cost of doing business, just how incredibly challenging that is for a small business operating in these areas. And so where we see that is things like, particularly in New York, commercial rents are just, they're crippling small businesses, and they have been since way before the pandemic, back to, the years pre-pandemic. In Brooklyn, commercial rents went up 23% in Brooklyn, and there were other areas where it was going up even higher than that. And these are things that small businesses are just having to deal with every day, that are just significantly impacting their business. And so where we see that coming through in our work is, within our legal program, our lawyers that work with us are doing a lot of work with small businesses to really help them try and address that and put in place leases that actually allow them to operate their business and don't have clauses in there that are super punitive, and help them make sure that there aren't clauses that are allowing landlords to put in incredibly difficult lease renegotiations for people year after year after year. So our legal program is doing a lot of work around commercial rent assistance. And then our finance program is a little more foundational, not directly addressing those sort of needs coming out of, the cost of commercial rents, but certainly looking at how to put the financial infrastructure in place that just gives small businesses a little bit more of a buffer, makes them a little bit more resilient. So when these things when they do come across these barriers, these challenges, they have the financial infrastructure there to be able to just withstand it a little bit better.
Wow, just learned a lot there. So in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and first I'll start by saying our organization was co-founded over 20 years ago by our local greater area Sioux Falls Chamber of Commerce and the Sioux Falls Development Foundation. So 20 years ago, they had the foresight to say, we need to invest in some sort of infrastructure, and specifically back then it was tech and biotech business. We were known as a technology business center to start, but that got us to where we are today. And I would say we call ourselves a three-legged economic development stool where, we work together, but I'd say that we're the punks. Like, we're the ones that break stuff. We're the ones that pilot and see what works. And the other interesting piece of this is, so Sioux Falls specifically is growing at a pace of about 5,000 people per year. And the city does not look anything like it did when I was a kid growing up in the 90s, I'll tell you that. And specifically, there is a demographic study that says that 40% of our school district is not white. When I was a kid, it was probably like 5%. So we have some growing pains as a city that we're working through, and I think we're also still working through that we've always done it this way mentality when it comes to economic development. And I'm one that likes to buck the trends. I like to, we're all about DE&I. And it's just been interesting to try to show our partners the investing in these programs and these people is going to go so far. And we've done that through, again, the CNPP grant. I can't say enough about it, but we were awarded $1 million to take those dollars and serve as many underserved communities across the state of South Dakota as we are able. And through that opportunity, we've been serving new Americans and immigrants through an organization called Lutheran Social Services. We've been working on tribal land for the very first time on the Pine Ridge Reservation with an organization called Thunder Valley CDC. The list goes on, but that opportunity has given us permission to forge these incredible partnerships because we are a team of 5 people. When you talk about nonprofit problems, we're a team of 5 people. We can't do all of this work ourselves. And it's truly been an exercise in ecosystem building to a point where we've been able to serve over 500 people through our Co-Starters Accelerator program in less than 3 years. So those dollars are going a long way, and it's changing the minds and hearts of those economic developers around us that have just been so pre-wired in finding the next unicorn business, find that next tech, biotech, those are sexy words. And that's those industries are still very important, but we are inclusive of all industry, and that has busted the doors wide open as far as who we're serving, how we're serving, and just again changing the landscape of this growing community. So I'm just so grateful to be sitting in this chair. We're obsessed with metrics as an organization as well. So just continuing to beat the drum and showing the impact, these dollars, this work that we're doing that you might think is cute. We get they serve the candle companies over there. Guess what? That candle company is gonna run circles around you someday, and they're gonna become a candle corporation. Watch. So I'm really proud of the work that we've been able to do and the permission that I've been given, to break things as an organization.
Incredible. Well, and if I could connect it to, I think, a piece of advice Inez gave us at the end of the last discussion, really know your community, know the small business. Joe, to your point, commercial rents are rising. So how are you understanding that challenge and being responsive to it? I realized I did not start with saying I am not going to be selfish and be the only one asking questions. We are going to have time for audience questions. A few more questions from myself, but please be thinking of those as our panelists continue to share their knowledge. Brian, if I could keep with you, since you made a comment about being punk, you're breaking things, we love to see it.
We're in DC, right?
And you also commented about how your organization has changed over its 15 years. So talk a little bit about that growth, but also how you continue to evolve your organization and its programming as your local community changes, but also trends maybe you're seeing at the state or national level.
So in my 5 years with the organization, our physical location has changed, our name has changed, and our operations have changed. And part of that has to do with the pandemic, but it's something that's been talked about even before the pandemic hit. So we started as this, we were called the South Dakota Technology and Business Center. And we had this unicorn business. I feel like the facility was built for this particular business. So there's a company that was called DocuTap at the time. They're an electronic medical records company. And they went to this facility, this 45,000 square foot facility on the northwest side of town, on the Southeast Technical College campus. So there was a reason why it was located where it was. But fast forward 20 years later, this company exited for $2 billion. And we're still being compared, that's the barometer that we're being compared to still today. And it makes you a little, I don't know what the right word is. Sometimes I feel vulnerable, where, are we doing the right thing? Why haven't we found the next DocuTap? And there's been some other wins along the way, don't get me wrong. But again, the landscape has changed over time. Community building. I worked for a downtown development corporation before I came onto this organization, and we were building up the core of our community, and I was just seeing how it was growing and flourishing, and that's where the people want to be. That's where the entrepreneurs are. So then when I had to relocate out to the northwest side of town where all I had to eat was Subway, it was painful, and it motivated me, to work with my board and the greater Sioux Falls community to say, how do we get this thing downtown? And it took a village to get done, and that's a strength of our city, is working together as a community to putting your egos aside to get things done. So went from a 45,000 square foot facility with co-working space that nobody was co-working in because it was too far away from the core, to a 4,500 square foot facility in the heart of Sioux Falls. It's a historic freight depot. It was built in 1894. It is beautiful. Please come to Sioux Falls. I'll give you a tour. But the city of Sioux Falls gifted us the opportunity to be in this space for 10 years. So we pay $1 per year in rent, with the caveat that we had to do the capital campaign to raise 1.6-ish for a build out. And that was well worth the money. And the other cool thing is that our old facility, our 45,000 square foot facility, was then reimagined into a hospital simulation center for the Southeast Technical College campus, which is bolstering economic development for nursing and medical students, which is incredible. So again, we've come a long way. There's been a ton of transition as an organization, going through a rebrand, a relocation. My hair has turned completely gray through this process. I never in a million years would have thought I'd be managing this type of activity. But since we've relocated, it's been nothing but validating. We have seen people just like flocking through the doors because we're so visible, we're so accessible. Again, we're in the heart of the city where people want to be, where they want to grow and flourish. And it might not sound like we have a lot of space, but the space is humming. It is filled with activity, and it's not just us doing the work. It's all of our economic development partners around us that are making this engine go. And I don't remember if there was another part to your question, but that was kind of it, right? Like the transition of all of this?
I think you nailed it.
Yeah.
Well, and I will say I heard a lot of exclamations of success and being impressed, so I'm sure people are going to have some follow-up information on how you did all of that. It's incredible.
Absolutely.
But Joe, similar question to you. I know you recently came into the role as CEO and Start Small, Think Big. So how has the organization changed, and maybe what are your eyes towards the future as you take the helm?
Yeah, I mean, we for sure have been through a pretty significant transition, really coinciding with the pandemic. Prior to the pandemic, we were an in-person team with an office in New York, very embedded in the community within New York. Clients would sort of come into our office and do a lot of in-person sessions with people and get in-person support. And then really during the pandemic, as a lot of people did, moved to being a virtual team, a remote team, do not now have an office, and really transitioned our organization to providing services virtually for small businesses and have continued that. We did survey businesses coming out of the pandemic and heard loud and clear that they did not want to go back to schlepping across New York to go and spend an hour with a lawyer, and that they were very happy with this new virtual model of life, and that they actually preferred that we delivered services virtually. And so we've continued with that model. At the same time, we've been trying to build our organization in California, which has been very different to New York. In New York, we really did have a foothold. Like I said, we started there in 2010, and in California, we were much newer, and it really took a completely different approach when we were going into communities like Oakland and San Jose, that we couldn't just step into those communities and just presume that we'd arrived with free services and everybody would just come flocking to us and thanking us. that's just not the way it works. And so we've really had to do a lot of community building through community partners, knowing that they are the ones who are on the ground day in, day out, working with these small businesses. And so through them, we have had to gain the trust of small businesses and really work alongside them and collaborate with them to together have an impact on the small business community. And so we have had really successful coalitions, really successful collaborations with nonprofit partners, with community partners, where we are coming in and complementing the work that they are doing. So they are already providing capital, providing support for small businesses, providing hotlines for them, and we are coming in as a complementary service to that. So it's been a big shift, a big transition. I've been with Start Small for about 4 years now. I stepped into the executive director role at the start of this year. Our founder transitioned out last year. So this is a new role, but an organization that I do know and feel personally very passionate about small businesses.
Well, and Joe, I'd love to keep on that topic of trust, because John, I know you provided that in your initial comments as well, trust between the capital allocators and those who are receiving the capital. So with that idea of trust, are there organizations that you are working with to best respond to the capital needs of your community and your customers?
So there are, right? But I do think, again, when I go back into the history of our organization, we have 42 years of being stewards and doing the right thing. Trust isn't something that you show up and you say, I care about it in this moment, and everybody's like, oh, we're glad you're here, right? So oftentimes in our partnerships, one of the things that we are bringing and delivering is the aspect of trust and connection, right? And then what we have always tried to do is be catalytic, and be catalytic in that we're a relatively small bank. I would tell you, I don't even have the aspiration of us being a large bank. I want us to be small and innovative and nimble, and again, demand-based. So we look at the largest problems out there that are of some type of financial nature. And then we figure out, okay, what can we do? And I'll give you 2 examples of that. There is a state agency that we work with in the state of Maryland that was created to provide venture capital to Marylanders. Everyone who lives in Maryland pays taxes, so it is our money that they are giving to these companies. And we've all heard the statistics about venture capital going to African Americans and going to African American women, which is essentially nothing. We looked at it and we said, okay, well, let's create a program. We're going to create a program where we go and find you entrepreneurs. So we went around the state, found great entrepreneurs with great ideas and great businesses. Let's find a way to get you enough capital to either get your intellectual property locked down, to get a minimum viable product, and give you technical assistance so you're at the point where someone else can be the next form of capital for you. So we did all those things. We packaged the program and we said, listen, we're gonna put up $20,000. You're gonna put up $20,000. We ran the program successfully, put 15 companies through it in the first iteration, ran it a second year, put another 10 through it. And now that runs, pardon me? Oh, and now that runs on its own. Without us being there, we separately do that. So that was catalytic in terms of pulling the state off the sideline to make these investments. The other, situation that we looked at in Baltimore, same affordable housing challenges that everyone else has, but also decreasing them out, but still blight, right? It's a city that used to have 1 million people and now has less than 500,000, and you've got the same housing stock. The challenges we diagnosed it and looked at it was we didn't have enough hands in the community doing the rehabilitation work. And that just there wasn't a large enough census of developers. And developers that were from the communities that needed to be redeveloped and revitalized, right? Because part of the work in development is going into the community and the community accepting you and saying, yes, you're welcome to do this work here, right? If you know the woman that's sitting on her stoop, then guess what? Your development is going to be more protected while you're trying to build it. You're going to be welcomed. You're not going to have to do 3 years of legwork trying to get the community bought into letting you do this work. So we created a program called the Emerging Developers Program. We have put 250 plus developers through a formal training program to do that work. And you know, the secret to all of this stuff, or the catalytic thing to all of this stuff for us, is we know that often our best ideas, and we love to pilot things too, are copied. But we don't care, right? Like at the end of the day, now there are 6 emerging developer programs. That's great. We built a co-working space 7 years ago. Now there are, I don't know how many co-working spaces in Baltimore, right? And there are more people providing venture capital, and that's the work that we do. That's how we try to integrate ourselves into and try to partner with folks to bring greater results.
Well, so I think that's a good goal for all of us. What is one thing we're going to steal from someone that we've met, something that we've heard? Okay, so you have yours. I love it. All right, so this is going to be my last question, and then would love to start getting the audience engaged. I see one up here already. So Daniel, we've talked about, you know, all of the changes that have happened at the national level. A lot of times DC always feels really at the heart of that. So how have you worked with your partner organizations across the entirety of the DMV, and maybe a little bit beyond, to continue serving small businesses and supporting entrepreneurs, founders, whatever word we want to use?
Yeah, that's a great question. And first of all, we have built and we continue to build a great team of the Greater Washington Board of Trade in order for us to be able to serve those who are in the region. We have to be very intentional, and we bring in together chambers of commerce, economic development organizations from around the region to talk about the different issues that are out there. And we have to listen to what the needs are of that region. Here is very unique because we're working with cities, counties, state, federal, and it just gets very intricate when you're talking about policy-related issues. So we put events together as well with leaders from around the region in order for us to bring in elected officials, appointed officials, to talk about what are the issues they're working on, what is it that they have that is coming in terms of policy-related issues that we can get in ahead of the game, if you will. So we need to stay on top of not only what they are working on, but also make sure that the members are served properly in terms of feeding them the right information, number one, but also to make sure that our team is informed of what's going on so that we can all cooperate, because we are the Greater Washington Board of Trade. We've been around since 1889, and you probably turn your head gray, but I used to have hair and not anymore. We are a small team, but these guys work really, really hard to get us where we are and who we are right now. So some of the issues that we continue to look at, again, is mental health issues, AI that is coming up already. The pandemic left us with a huge thinking, how can we handle things a little bit different? And as you can understand, we also have a lot of minority small businesses that are English as a second language. So we have to work with organizations that provide that example, that provide that class where they tell them, this is how you open a business, or this is how you conduct yourself to stay in business, because it becomes very, very difficult. Now, obviously, we get around quite often in this whole area, and we have very good relationships, but we're also good about introducing people to other people. We can tell their story. They can tell their story better than we can. So we do this in order for us to make sure that everybody's working with everybody, not just us working solely in Northern Virginia or DC or Maryland, but the whole region. And we're doing, I think, an amazing work based on a lot of the hurdles and some of the issues that we see ahead. But we will continue to do it. And forums like this help put a lot of the information out there that helps, not only at the regional level, because all the regions, as you have heard here today, we are different to a certain degree. We overlap on a lot of things, but we are different to a certain degree. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Danielle. Well, so I know we've heard a lot about specific programming, strategies for evolving organization, listening to the small business in your community. So I'd say pretty much anything is fair game for our audience, so I'd love to take the first question.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Ray Penny from Access to Capital for Entrepreneurs out of the great state of Georgia. My question is for Breen and a little bit of John, because all of you have touched on the collaborativeness of your work, and I guess what I'm asking today is, how do you, once you've started to get some success, maintain that? Because in Atlanta, everybody and their mother's now coming there. It's the hot spot to be, and I had to get out of that mindset that it's competition, because there's plenty of work around. And my boss once asked me the question of how many people were in the state of Georgia, and then asked how many people were in our loan portfolio, and the aha moment, the bank competitor and me stopped, and we said this is a collaborative effort. But what I worry about is that with success, people start to want to glom onto that and hold on to it. So how do you in Sioux Falls, and John, you in Baltimore, make sure that that culture of collaborativeness is maintained? Thank you.
Well, I would say we have really good leadership in Sioux Falls right now. Our mayor happens to be an entrepreneur himself, so he understands the challenges that we're up against. I do feel like our city has grown so fast that there's still that big fish mentality in Sioux Falls. You can't just own any one idea or industry. There's a lot of competition, but that sharpens the rest of us. So collaboration is absolutely imperative to the success of our city. I wish that we could get to the point where some of us could put our defenses down a little bit and have an open and honest conversation about the gaps and the opportunities in the ecosystem. We're starting to have those conversations. Not everybody wants to come to the table. And I would almost say, like, I don't mean this in the way that it sounds, but our greater area Chamber of Commerce is struggling, I think, with an identity crisis right now. And they're seeing the work that we're doing, even though we're partners, I think they're seeing that as a little bit threatening to their membership, their livelihood, when in reality, like, we just need to sit around the table and figure out how we work best together into this new era. I'm so excited to bring back all of this knowledge and information and just the validation of the work that we're doing the right things as a city, you know, to continue to move the needle forward. But again, that takes a collaborative community, and it takes the right leadership and bending the ears of those people in charge and beating the drum that we've got data for you. We're creating an impact. We're not here to step on the toes of those that came before us, but we're in a different era. We're in a different generation, and we have to innovate or we're gonna die. So that's how I feel about that.
Yeah, and I agree with that totally. I guess the other thing that I would say is I'm a banker at heart, right? I just am. So at the end of the day, I think a lot about risk management. So I want to share risk with everyone that's capable of sharing the risk with me, right? Because when we talk about transforming communities, it takes so much capital to have an effect. You need everybody and every resource playing in the right way, right? The other thing I would tell you is, you know, don't be apologetic about leading, right? If I know how to do this best, if I've created it, then you can be helpful, but you're gonna be helpful in the framework that I've created for you to be helpful, right? And the last thing which supports that point is I wanna be, and I push the entirety of my organization to be great partners and trusted partners. If it is that someone else shows up and someone who we've had a relationship with wants to go a different way, it's because we haven't been who we should have been or who we could be to them, right? There should be no question of whether somebody wants to work with us. There shouldn't be, if we're doing it right. Absolutely.
Well, I'd also like to add to that really quick. I think it's critical in how we design federal, state, or local programs too, to incentivize the collaboration. I know that's at the heart of regional innovation clusters. I know that was baked into community navigators. So how those programs are designed.
Can I share one thing about that specifically? So one opportunity that has come about because of the CMPP effort, we're partnering with the Sioux Falls Area Development Foundation to stand up a child care cohort because we have a child care crisis happening across the country. And the only thing we know what to do is to provide that foundation of business resource and help those individuals that do not identify as entrepreneurial create a community for themselves, and that has come out of that CNPP effort. So again, I'm so appreciative that that trickle-down effect is real, and it is making waves all the way down to the local level.
I believe we have one more question.
Just for everyone in the room, I think we all want to steal the emerging developer program. So I'll just ask for everybody if there's a way that we could, you could share information about how we can have access to that.
Absolutely, and I'll tell you, so we are in our 12th cohort at this point, and it used to be all local developers in Baltimore. We actually, during the pandemic, started putting it online, so people apply. So it isn't that you have to be in Baltimore to be in this program, but it's an open book at this point. Happy to share the resource.
All right, well, we have 2 minutes left, so we're gonna go rapid fire. I'm gonna project us into the future. It's May 2nd, 2025, AEO Regionalism Summit 2. What is something you all would hope to announce at that second summit? What is your goal for the next 365 days?
Yeah, so it's not a secret because it's public. We had to make the public announcement, but we are opening a branch in Montgomery County, which we had a small presence there, but this will be our first deposit presence there. And that pushes us further into the rest of the DMV, so we're excited about that. And then we are just working on some different concepts around innovation with respect to providing access to capital in some places that we've seen a huge need nationally and not a lot of intermediaries providing capital.
To have John as a member of the Board of Trade when they moved to Montgomery County. So there, stay in touch with your members and those who represent you in the community with economic development, chambers of commerce, which we do on a regular basis, but don't lose that and continue to do the work because this, I believe, is my second or third pandemic that we're going through, and we don't know what's coming up next. Could be a pandemic, could be something totally different because we have electronics attached to us 24/7. It could be very different on how we come across. So especially for those entrepreneurs and also businesses that are startups that come from other countries, this is a very international location here. And we have a lot of companies that come here to open. And we want to make sure that we continue to have an ecosystem where everybody can be collaborative and we can work together. We are 24 plus different counties and cities and towns. However, we have to cooperate because we want to make sure that this continues to have a quality of life, but at the same time to be very attractive to not only businesses, but people to move here. So welcome.
Joe?
For us, I have to get the word pilot in. We piloted a new web-based portal, which is a tech solution for us last year, and are just in the process of launching it. I could talk about it for probably 60 minutes, but I'll try and get it to 60 seconds. Essentially, it is, we're a team of 30 people. They do the work of 100 people. It is an incredible team at Start Small, but just there, you know, there's just the reality of like, we are under-resourced as an organization, and so what we started looking at was like, how can we do more with the people that we have got, and have launched this web-based portal that really, it streamlines the process for an entrepreneur coming into our system. It tailors their journey. It allows us to collaborate better with both community partners and our corporate partners, pro bono coordinators in law firms. It just enhances the whole experience. And then coming full circle back to a regional approach, our vision for it, I don't know if I can promise May 2025, but certainly like the vision is that when an entrepreneur goes through their journey using this web portal, that what they will experience is tailored, thanks to the technology, to them based on where they are, what their industry is, what location they're in, what opportunities there are in that region, what their primary language is. And so that's something that is super exciting for us at the moment, and hopefully we'll have more in 2025.
Brian?
I want another $1 million. When can I get that? But honestly, I do hope that there's some opportunity through the CNPP. We're one of 51 organizations across the country. My friend out here in the room is also a recipient, another one over here. But how do we leverage this success? You know, and how do we show the collective impact to potentially, you know, find more dollars, right? And those, we also want to see local dollars, and we are seeing local dollars come through. So for me, in a year's time, I hope that the 5 spoke organizations that I work with today continue to work with us, that we find a way to fund those opportunities, and that we find more, and we already are. Again, I mentioned a childcare cohort. We're also exploring the idea of supporting the trades, journeymen. But there's so many possibilities because we had, again, the privilege of reimagining how we deploy our programming and who can we serve and how can we serve. And it's very nimble, so we can take it and kind of rewire it to meet the needs of certain communities and certain industries. So the sky's the limit, but if I could have another $1 million, that would be fab.
Okay, so we'll get to work on that. Everyone remember we were at the White House. And
We are at the White House.
Please join me in thanking the panelists. That was incredible.
Wonderful job. Thank you so much. Remember to, we should all be punks like Breen. Yes, and get after it. Excellent. So we are going to pause quickly as the panelists leave the stage. Thank you very much. We're going to start to shift some things around. We are going to take a 2 or 3 minute break while we do that, and then we'll start up again here for our final conversation. So we'll see you here in a couple of minutes.
So I had a little issue with your badge. Somebody threw it away by accident, but I got you a new one. Sorry about
You know
that.
what? My name's spelled correctly.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I had a little issue with your badge. It was thrown away by accident, but I got you
so
another
I
one.
just downloaded it onto my phone.
They meant to throw me away,
Sorry.
right?
I got you a different badge. I'm sorry. The first one got thrown away by accident.
Thank you.
that's all. Everything else is fine. I think there's waters if they'd like, but yeah, the microphone's not too far away. We'll get a shout from the audio.
Okay.
Make sure it's coming.
Awesome. Debrief so I can go ready.
Okay, good. Good. Well, another 2 minutes. They've been sitting for a very long time. Everything is about
Good job so far.
yeah. Almost there.
Just getting right.
This is the easy part. That's right. This is the easy part.
This is
challenge.
the easy part.
Oh yeah, everything's done.
I was gonna say the next part is the easy part.
Oh man, today is an easy part. Like all of today for me is. As long as we did our duties.
I heard Natalie talking about it too.
I like it because it's collapsed into one. Two, it's very flexible.
It's a bigger stage.
Yeah. And if we want, we had another one, and they're very inexpensive. Yeah, no, it's really good. And we're going to be going toward more church. Our colors are
Doesn't happen very often.
Between them and drinks. Maybe they should have given us the drink coupon so we can hand it out. Ask a question, you get a drink After you get the last panel, we get a drink.
Yes, that's right. All right. No, you do. Don't think you don't, you do. All right, folks, we're getting ready here. Another couple of minutes. We'd like everyone to come back in if you can as we get ready to have our final conversation.
We're on pretty much the exact same time. Kiska? I feel like I asked you that. Same here.
All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and get started. If I can ask everyone to come in and find your seats here. We're now ready for our third session of the day. And to recap, we heard from Assistant Secretary Castillo on how the EDA is engaging at the national level. We narrowed our focus after that and talked about the economic development context at the state level. And we last heard from a panel of experts who shared what that economic development looks like at the local level. We're going to now take a step back and we're going to widen our lens just a bit to a conversation on sustainability and inclusion. In an era of transformation, the focus on environmental sustainability and social inclusion has never been more pressing. Our final panel, led by AEO's own Senior Research Associate, Chelsea Maxwell, will explore why small businesses must lead the charge in driving meaningful change and adapt to evolving societal expectations. So joining Chelsea today on the stage in the conversation are Coles Jennings, Director of Corporate Sustainability at Community Climate Collaborative, and Scott Case, Vice President of CSR and Sustainability at the National Retail Federation. So thank you all for joining us. Look forward to this conversation. And Chelsea, I turn it over to you.
Hello. It is such a pleasure to be up here and to be with these two amazing thought partners and speakers in this space. So first, thank you, Scott and Coles, so much for joining me in this conversation.
Thanks for having us.
So to get started, you know, the title of this session is A Conversation on Sustainability and Inclusion. And earlier in the day, we heard, you know, Todd Green use the term ESG, and I feel like there's a lot of different conversations on, I mean, there's a lot of different terms that get used when we're talking about sustainability. And I guess my first question is, like, what is it? Can we just get aligned on what we're talking about? Let's set the table for this conversation. Scott, if you could.
Wow, Chelsea. I love like the really difficult question to start us off. The funny thing is, I actually wrote my master's thesis in the mid-1990s. It was called Visions of Sustainability. And the whole goal was to define what sustainability is. And honestly, I'm still working on it. But I think the key challenge is that everybody seems to have their own definition of sustainability, and that makes these kinds of conversations very, very challenging. But from my perspective, from the perspective of the National Retail Federation, sustainability is big, huge, broad. It's the basic idea that absolutely every single decision, every business decision, every purchasing decision, every decision has hidden human health, environmental, social, and community impacts. And sustainability really is all about being conscious about what those impacts are and making decisions, whether they're purchasing decisions, strategy decisions, business location decisions, making those kinds of decisions, understanding those impacts exist, and choosing to create local benefits, local value when you make those decisions. So DEI, ESG, corporate social responsibility, they're all parts of sustainability. And I kind of divide them up. You know, the DEI piece really falls under the social dimensions of sustainability. And ESG, it's just accounting. ESG is just a metric to evaluate sustainability metrics. So don't get distracted by the anti-woke, anti-ESG crowd.
Don't get distracted, because it's everywhere.
It is. We'll outlast them.
All right. That's a good point. I mean, when you frame sustainability as that broad, it reminds me of the earlier panel when we were discussing, you know, we were here first with DEI. So, you know, and also you mentioned CSR, which I know it's like a precursor almost to ESG. So, yeah, I mean, that's a really great point that will outlast that term. So that's kind of also why I like to talk about this conversation from the lens of sustainability and inclusion. Keep it broad. One thing at an earlier panel that really stood out to me was when Todd Green was moderating that first panel. He asked the state, the people speaking on the state panels about the challenges that they're experiencing regarding ESG and DEI. Everyone talked about DEI. So that kind of, for me, raised the question of, you know, we're at a summit that's focused on economic development. Does sustainability even have a place here? Like, is this conversation appropriate for the summit?
I could take that one. In a word, yes. In more words, so I work for a nonprofit that works with communities in Virginia, and we're focused on climate action at the local level. I have the wonderful role of working with locally owned and operated businesses, and what we're really trying to do is create climate leadership, you know, among businesses ranging from just a handful of employees up to some of the larger employers in Virginia. And I'm an engineer by background, so I'm a how things work kind of guy. I got a pretty good handle on what we need to do, but I've been in this role for a few years, and the big learning curve for me is how do we talk about this stuff in a way that means any darn thing to local business owners, right? It's a very heavy conversation at times, and I have the first rule I've developed for ESG, for talking to local businesses, don't say ESG, right? It's a simple rule. I'm half joking. It's important to stay informed, obviously, and I know we'll talk about some of the downstream effects that are coming from ESG are already here, but I think the jargon has kind of left Main Street behind, right? We've lost the bit a little bit in terms of what we're really talking about, ESG, sustainability. It's really about protecting our environment. And if you're not a tree hugger like me, you can think about that as your communities, right? Of course, our natural environment, so it can protect us and give back to us, but just taking care of our communities, investing in social causes, investing in cleaner communities. You know, there's so much change that needs to happen to address some of these environmental issues we're facing, and local businesses are just such an important part of that conversation.
Scott, you also said yes to that. So I'm curious, when you, just to repeat the question for you, what is the connection that you see between this summit on economic development and a regional lens with this conversation on sustainability?
Yeah, I think it boils down to kind of a fairly simple concept. If your business is not yet capable of meeting payroll, of paying rent, of paying your employees, and paying yourself a living wage, you can't really think about your broader community. So when we strengthen the micro businesses, what we're doing is enabling the kind of sustainability that drives me, which is the big kind of global perspective. So you have to start by helping the local businesses become vibrant businesses, because they then build the backbone of vibrant communities. And vibrant communities, by definition, it's empowering everyone in the community. And that's, sustainability builds up from the ground level broader. And too many times we talk about sustainability from the big, huge macro level, the global level, the interplanetary level, right? But ultimately, it's about individuals. And all of these systems are connected. And so if we really want a sustainable global environment, we have to have locally sustainable businesses. And sometimes sustainability means just simple viability. And that's okay, because the broader sustainability goals, the people, planet, profit kinds of pieces, that builds up from a molecular level.
I'm really curious, Coles, how that lands on you with your focus on climate. Scott, I'm hearing from a national, your national focus, your global perspective, a little bit about, why you're so passionate about this topic and why I'm inferring I'm inferring why you believe that this room of small business advocates should care about this topic. So first, I would like to make sure just give you a platform to be very clear about that. And then, Coles, I'd like to move over to you and talk about how that lands on you from a hyper-local perspective.
Ooh, that's fun. Be careful handing me a platform. I think to be very, very clear, it absolutely connects, and it has to connect. I think sustainability has always existed in one form or another. If we go back to the 1700s, or we go back to the 1000s, or we go back to the 100s, people wanted to do business with people that they trusted, that people who weren't harming their local network, their local community. So it's always been a part of it. You wanted to do business with people who were doing good by their employees and by their communities. What's happened over the last couple of centuries is our definition of community has in many ways expanded. We now talk about global supply chains, and we talk about global businesses even. But ultimately, the idea of sustainability, of treating each other with kindness and respect, not spoiling your own nest, is really all part of it. So it's kind of the heart and soul of sustainability from my perspective.
Yeah, I completely agree, Scott, because I think it boils down to the best stewards of local communities is a vibrant local business economy, right? I mean, these are folks that are invested in the places that they live, they're invested in their employees, they're invested in their people, and so viability absolutely is a starting point, because if we really want leaders on these local issues, which my organization C3 delves into a lot, those voices are really important. I wanted to talk about one example where kind of these things all tie together, and that's one thing my organization does is we research the impact of local policy and local decision making, you know, from a climate perspective, from a sustainability perspective. I think people might be surprised at just how much local governments control and impact. So I'm gonna put everybody to sleep for a second, and I'll wake you back up. Zoning ordinances, okay? I had one job, was to not put people to sleep, but these are incredibly boring, incredibly drawn out local processes. They take often years of community engagement, of planning. You can construct these ordinances, or you can construct even the planning process in an exclusive way. You know, you can have token meetings in City Hall and call it a day, and you're gonna do what you're gonna do. Or you can be very inclusive about it, right? Reaching the small business community, reaching underserved communities. These are the legacy of local infrastructure, of the fabric of local communities. They're incredibly important. So I just think about the more viable, to kind of bring it back to the original question, the more viable a local business economy is, the more supported it is, the more it's able to provide this stewardship and participate in this broader sustainability conversation that we're encouraging.
Something that I'm kind of hearing from this conversation so far is that this might be a national conversation, but it has profound local implications. Is that fair?
Oh, 100%.
Yes.
And I would say it's a global conversation that has local. But the local jobs are going to be what drives the sustainability solutions, right? So it's local individuals who are installing the solar panels. It's local individuals that are rebuilding the infrastructure to protect us all from the adverse impacts of climate change and adverse weather impacts. It's the local businesses that are going to be addressing local flooding concerns and how to mitigate local flooding concerns. It's the local businesses that are going to be providing resilient supply chains. Think local farmers, think local manufacturing, so all of these kinds of pieces are climate issues, broader sustainability issues, but ultimately economic development issues as well.
What do you think are the opportunities for small businesses in participating in this shift that you're kind of describing?
Yeah, so I love that framing of opportunity, and it's something I really try to lean into. When I tell people I do climate work, sometimes you kind of see their shoulders like sag, and it's a heavy conversation, right? It's a bit of a downer, but I think it's because at the individual level, at the small business level, you know, how can I possibly make a difference, right? Which is a valid question. I think the best way is to look at this as an opportunity. Like, we are in the middle of a generational challenge, a generational global challenge, but we are rising to meet it with generational investment, right? Our entire infrastructure system, our entire energy system, everything is changing right under our feet, and that affects everything, exactly like you're saying, Scott. So whether you're in a green business or you're just a business, you use energy, you produce waste, there are opportunities to improve these things, and I think that's really the framing that especially the small business economy needs to embrace. We got to get away from this mindset of sustainability is another thing we have to do, it's another thing we have to learn. It really is an opportunity. Young employers in particular, when younger generations are surveyed, count myself among millennials, we're pretty fired up about this, and we're really looking for employers that care, right? No matter how big the company. So depending on the survey, between half and 2/3 of the younger two generations, they want to see green initiatives in their company. So opportunity, right? Economic opportunity, people opportunity, community opportunity. We really need to emphasize that.
Coles, your organization, C3, is working with small businesses directly on some of this stuff. What are you guys doing on the ground? How are you helping small businesses take up and catalyze with these opportunities?
Yeah, so one of the great things about my role is, like I said, our real criteria is locally owned and operated. So I do get to work with a local restaurant all the way up to our local hospital, right? So a couple employees to 1,000 employees. So we craft our programs, we kind of think about the hierarchy of needs, and it really goes back to that viability question. And every engagement opportunity that we have with those partners, it's a chance to educate. And so the fun part is working with the small businesses, and frankly, our strategy is just give away some money. We do these energy efficiency grants, and we buy new appliances, we upgrade lights, we provide these kind of quality of life improvements. And that opens the door for a conversation about energy and about sustainability. And over and over and over again, you see the lights turn on a little bit, no pun intended, just to have that conversation, right? We don't ask a lot of these smaller businesses that are focused on viability. And then we work with the larger employers. We craft, we have basically a leadership circle where we craft emissions reductions, from some non-traditional, not Fortune 500s, but local leaders. And that just really shows what's possible. But all along the way, our role is coaching, encouragement, again, take this heavy topic and conversation, make it more opportunistic, make it more optimistic, and that's our path to success.
So I'm going to go ahead and make an assumption here that a lot of the people in this room hear terms like, zero emissions or carbon neutral, and they're like, sure, sounds good. Awesome, go do that. But what does that, for those of us serving small businesses who don't have this background, what do we do? How do we get started? At the beginning of this conversation, I even, we talked about how there's so many different definitions. So how do we start? Where do we start?
I love that question. I wish you had asked me that like a decade ago. I think one of the challenges in the sustainability space is thus far most of the language around sustainability is being driven by national governments and global corporations. And so the language and the framing around sustainability feels completely overwhelming. But I can take it in a different direction. So I'm on the board of our local Goodwill. Goodwill is a retailer, people. So it is a connection. They get their products donated, and they make money and create jobs by selling the donated product, and they are workforce development kind of folks. What's happening right now is our local Goodwill is training women who might have come from a particularly rough background, rough family relationships, prison time, whatever, teaching them business skills by helping them go through the Goodwill donation pile, pull out the good stuff, and set up their own resale channels so they are selling Goodwill donated items online through a ThreadUp or a RealReal. They are starting their own businesses. And it's a sustainability business. This is stuff that might have otherwise ended up in a landfill. So we don't need to talk about net zero. We don't have to talk about carbon accounting. We don't have to talk about ESG. We don't have to have a formal sustainability strategy. We can start with something simple that we're reducing waste that might have otherwise ended up in a landfill. And by the way, we're turning something that might have been trash into money. And along the way, learning business skills. And so if you get to a point where you're now opening up, say, your own little thrift shop, right? Now, all of a sudden, you've got additional concerns. What about the electric bill? How do you reduce your electric bill? Energy efficient lighting is a little bit cheaper. It also, by the way, reduces your contributions to climate change. So you can just stair-step these kinds of issues from the micro level up to the global level. And it's the global level that, for whatever reason, has always motivated me. How are we going to fight climate change? But it turns out how you fight climate change is all those small little decisions that get made every day by everyone, everywhere.
I'm curious, Coles, how have you seen the businesses in Charlottesville and Richmond address climate? Like, what does this look like for them? When you have these conversations, when you're trying to sell your organization, how does it land on them? Part of where this question is coming from for me is that the smallest of businesses, just like a lot of our service providers in the room, have so many issues. There are so many challenges that are pressing. There's, all of this, there's always something. Why is this important now? And how are you making, and how do you talk to them about it?
Right.
And how are they responding?
Again, don't say ESG. First rule.
Don't say ESG, got it.
No, I think that, I used to come into these conversations really emphasizing the bottom line, and of course that's important, right? And Scott talked about it, right? Energy efficiency is a great example, solar power is a great example, and those are concrete actions that we're seeking. But it is okay, and it's in fact embraced over and over by local businesses to talk about community leadership, because these are things we're experiencing. Like, climate change is not an abstract issue anymore. We have entered felt effects, right? And we're talking about regionalism here today. It's different in different regions, but we're all feeling it. So it is part of our consciousness, and that is, again, an opportunity to say, hey, we're doing something about it, something within our control. And no, we're not asking for net zero, right? We're trying to be realistic about just do one thing. I use a little bit of a framework. It's how, what, and where. So the how is kind of how you operate, sort of no matter what you do, right? Energy efficiency, solar power, again, just some of these tangible infrastructure associated things, composting, all good examples. The what is maybe more your customer facing, right? So if you're a restaurant, try compostables, pilot stuff. I love that, right? Get customer feedback, see if it works, see if people like it, see if they keep coming back as they see this sort of visible commitment. And then the where, what are you doing in your community? Are you protecting green spaces? Are you involved in local civic organizations, et cetera, et cetera? So if you can kind of break it down and, again, demystify so many of these buzzwords and this jargon that have kind of run with the conversation, that's where we've seen the most success. So we are seeing, right, our business partners are going solar, and we're buying EVs, and we're piloting different things, and we're breaking stuff. This is all new territory, right? It's not all going to be perfectly smooth, but just seeing the appetite to try these things in the name of community leadership, that's really been a theme for us.
So one thing that I heard earlier in this conversation, and I think this was from you, Scott, was this relating back to how corporations are talking about sustainability and really, on a global scale, driving this conversation. If this conversation is so co-opted by corporations, how do we ensure that small businesses, particularly those from underserved communities, remain integral, that they're not left behind in this transition?
Ooh, you're good at this, thank you. I think one of the things is think hyperlocal, think regionalism, because when you start analyzing what are the adverse sustainability impacts of large organizations, what are their contributions to climate change, it's those incredible long distances of goods moving around the globe. It's the mining of raw materials and the creation of only new products, and that's where the big climactic impacts are. What we're beginning to see is when you start focusing on local supply chains, what you're doing is building local business communities that are interdependent. You start building regional economies that happen to be more sustainable in the process. And what we're eventually beginning to see is kind of a connection between these really large businesses and the smaller businesses. So in the retail sector, as an example, as retailers, big global retailers, big regional retailers, as they seek ways to be more sustainable, they're beginning to talk about the circular economy, keeping products in service as long as possible. Kohl's, when you're finished with that jacket, there are retailers that will want to buy it back from you so they can sell it to somebody else.
I'm never giving this jacket.
You're never giving up the jacket. It looks good on you. But what that's doing is actually creating local business opportunities. So if we're trying to avoid old appliances being used and thrown in the trash, how do you avoid that? You make sure you've got local repair opportunities so these products will last longer, they can be used longer. The same with fashion or footwear or automobiles or refabbing houses rather than building brand new. So these kinds of sustainability solutions are actually being embraced by the largest companies. They're beginning to finance local solutions. The big, huge retailers don't want to be connected with, clothing ending up in piles and places of the world where they don't belong. So if they want to avoid that, they can invest in local solutions to address those issues, turn those adverse impacts into positive opportunity. And that's going to create lots of local, regional, interesting pieces of the circular economy.
Kohl's, from your perspective, thinking locally, how do we make sure that our underserved small business owners don't get left behind in this transition?
Yeah, I think it really is, the folks in this room have a huge role to play, right? The support infrastructure that we put in place to support underserved businesses, diverse-owned businesses, we need to get up to speed on these issues. And I think that, historically we think about sustainability, again, as this separate conversation, or you have your expert for that. Everybody kind of needs to speak the language, get up to speed on all this money that's coming. Again, generational investment. If there's one thing I can impart on people, it's that there's a ton of money for sustainability and climate, and it's very recent, and it needs to land in communities, right? So the support infrastructure, regional, local, that is getting educated on these programs, federal grants, state grants, they're the ones that are going to be able to take advantage of it, right? And so we heard from a lot of these folks in the panels before, and shout out to the question about the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. Like, that's one example of green financing. It's another capital stream, because over and over again we hear access to capital is a big, big challenge. Well, now we have green capital, right? And we can start to lay that onto these more traditional methods of seeding businesses and starting businesses. So we can talk all day long about what businesses need to do, but the matter of fact is that we cannot expect them to educate themselves. They have too much to do. So we need a support infrastructure, nonprofits, local governments, economic development. Every local government should have a sustainability office. It should work hand in hand with all the decision makers to make sure that the business ecosystem is benefiting from this generational investment.
So this is the last panel of the day, and I'm sure we've covered a lot of information throughout the summit. So I'm just kind of curious, as people are walking out, what is it that you hope people take away from this conversation? What is it that you hope they do next?
You got it?
I don't know.
It's to both of you.
I go back to opportunity. I think mindset shift is so incredibly important, and it is okay to stick your foot in your mouth or not know the right term or not know where to start. I would encourage everyone, frankly, simple step, just have a conversation on this topic, right? Go back to your home office and just say, what are we doing on sustainability? Where are we with that? And then you can start to get into more specifics. But I think a lot of times for me, it's just getting started, doing the first thing, having the first conversation. It gets a lot easier from there. So I'm an eternal optimist. Again, I love this opportunity framework. I would love to impart that on everybody. Try to see it as a chance for transformation and to be part of that transformation.
Scott, before you respond, I just wanted to kind of broaden the question a little bit for you, because this conversation is also framed around inclusion. So I'm wondering how you see these conversations happening together, especially with your broad definition of sustainability. How do we proceed from here?
Wow, boy, I was ready to answer the easier question, but I think one of the things when we think about sustainability, there's a couple key questions you have to ask. What are we trying to sustain? For whom are we trying to sustain it? And over what time frame are we trying to sustain it? And so when you talk about what are you trying to sustain, we need clean air, we need clean water, we need a stable climate, we need economic opportunity, right? What we're trying to sustain. For whom are you trying to sustain it? The only appropriate answer, in my biased opinion, is you're trying to sustain it for everyone, everywhere, for all time. Leave no one out, leave no one behind. What are you trying to sustain? For whom are you trying to sustain it? And over what time frame? Forever. So I think when you start thinking about sustainability from that set of questions, there's no distinction between DEI or other aspects of this. It's baked into the concept. And I think that's an opportunity for all of us.
That is such an interesting perspective. And so with our last couple minutes, I'd love to open it up to the audience to see if there's anyone who wants to pose questions to Coles and Scott or reflect back on what has been shared here so far today.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Woohoo! It's for you. So when we go to our reception, because I'm looking forward to the reception, what can we do better to make sustainability concepts, climate concepts, what can we do better so that it's more meaningful for the micro businesses, the micro entrepreneurs? What can we do better so that it's easier to understand these things?
You gave great examples with the goodwill and that type of deal where, again, that makes it relevant. We're starting to have the conversations in our organization, and one of our contractors mentioned, food being disposed of every day, and the methane gas that's produced and all that, and how can we leverage that and maybe set up businesses that want to go and get the food before it spoils and take it out. So we're starting to have the dialogue, but it's helpful to me to hear, so I love coming to these events, other ideas that we hadn't even thought of that could be put together to help us better understand the sustainability concept. So
very cool. And I saw a bunch of hands out there. You're going to have to run fast.
I totally agree. And as you were talking, I thought about two things. Number one, as far as Texas, DEI is major for us. And we've had to make a major pivot and a major shift. And we're doing that with our businesses. The key thing that you said that I liked, and I'm glad you said it, because you supported the cause for more funding for technical assistance. It is in the education, number one. And the education is pivotal. Thank you. I'm from the country, excuse me. Because, you can talk about sustainability as far as, the electric cars in Texas, but if I go across the Red River to Oklahoma, where Chesapeake Oil is real big on natural gas, it's a no-no. So the the summits that we're having, it is critical because your language is different in every different state.
That's a great point.
But the same concept is here. And I'm working on my dissertation too, getting ready to do my defense, and that you're right. If you go back through the years, sustainability, we still cannot define it. So it's hard for us as we're teaching technical assistance to explain it to our small businesses, which is critical now because for them, they may think sustainability is, I need to feed my family. That's their sustainability. So thank you for that, and this is a push for more funding for technical assistance. Thank you.
To piggyback on what you said, I'll just add to that. I think that as somebody who works with small business owners on that access to capital problem, they're trying to hire the people that they need or implement the infrastructure that they need. And so to me, I think they can often feel like, oh, this is another thing. So I do think it should be similar to other approaches with you know, like a smoke and wheel approach where you partner with organizations such as my own and others in the room where you educate, like a two-step education process, right? So we do the technical assistance training, but if you can, you mentioned like greenhouse gas, I kind of missed that funding opportunity, but something where from the business owner's perspective, if you teach us how to speak in their language, and say, okay, you're able to like do well about doing good. You can secure capital and grow, but at the same time have a beneficial impact to your community, right? But like, how do we, like untrained, how do we communicate that? So I would love, in the interest and in the vein of what we talked about earlier, in the spirit of collaboration, I would love to collaborate so we can get trained to do that with our programs internally as they seek capital.
Absolutely. I mean, we need translators, right? Like, there's so much jargon. Again, it's important because this field has advanced so much. You need the experts kind of bleeding the edge, but you need translators to bring it back to, I think about solar a lot just because it's a big tangible thing. It seems like just a pipe dream for a small business, right? It's a big capital expense, but you stack tax credits, you stack local incentives, you stack depreciation. If you're a rural small business, you can get half your system paid for by the federal government. All of a sudden, like, you're free and clear in 2 years. And most people don't know that, right? Because it's so complex. And again, they're focused on viability. So one example, not to put everything back on solar, but if you have in-community trusted translators, I think is a good way to think about it, then you can really help move the needle and kind of parse through some of this inertia of just like, again, focused on the day-to-day.
I was just going to ask, so Coach, you just broke it down to that layman terms, right? So that has to be assimilated to those small businesses so they can understand that. And so we have the ideas and we understand what's going on in the ecosystem, but the knowledge transfer has to happen. So for me, I was going to say it's focusing on those opportunities that are available. If I am a small business, if I'm a construction company, if I'm something, how can I participate in this and transform my business to be able to drive that going forward? But somebody got to explain it to me, and someone has to show me where the opportunities are, and that technical assistance, like she said, has to be able to be there, and the capacity for those organizations to be able to translate that knowledge so they understand it fully. And I think we're overthinking some things, but just starting from the basic of just give me the knowledge and let me go, or give that knowledge to the business so they can take off and run. It's almost like the infusion of technology that came, a while ago, and everybody, all the tech startup was over here just doing, and then a group of people were just left out of that, and then they're way behind. And so how do we get ahead of that? And how do we be able to infuse that knowledge on a more faster pace?
So I know Coles has a more technical response to that question, but I want to point out every conversation, this is my first time at AEO, and I don't understand most of what you guys are talking about, right? They're financing this and the finance that and this access to that kind of capital and this, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't understand any of it. But you guys know how to translate that to these small individual business owners. And you don't try and teach them all of it. You just teach them these are the 3 pieces you need to understand right now at this point in time. And sustainability works that way too. The challenge is it's so big and so huge and so complex, most of it doesn't matter to a lot of businesses. You just have to focus on these 2 or 3 pieces. So you guys are already experts at taking crazy complex stuff and turning it into motivation and action. And so I think Kohl's has got, I'm gonna just throw you out there, man. Kohl's has got the ability to translate this stuff so that you can begin to say, these are your key opportunities for a business of this size.
Yeah, I'll keep it high level as well, which is that trusted voices are the most impactful voices, right? You don't have to be an expert. You have to know enough to get them started. I think building that trusting relationship and being in that role of support, you're not selling them something directly, right? You're here to focus on their viability and their success. It goes exactly to what you're saying, Scott, that then you can get up to speed on the specifics, but establishing that trust first and foremost, which is why I'm so thrilled to be here today, because the people in this room are exactly those trusted relationships. So not everybody needs to be a sustainability expert by any means, but we all need to speak it, right? Know who to call if you have a specific question, and we can talk about REAP grants and LEAP grants and IRA and all that other stuff.
I'm glad you
right?
can talk
I can
about
put you guys to sleep with acronyms all afternoon, but you don't need to know them, right? You just need to know who to call. So,
Well, thank you so much. So I just want to acknowledge that we have skimmed the surface of this conversation. I love that we ended up bringing it back to the local, how important our local community organizations are in the work that we're doing in terms of pursuing sustainability and inclusion. AEO has been thinking about this for the last couple of years, and so I also would just like to share that we are going to be releasing some new research in June. The report is called Seizing Opportunities, How Small Businesses Can Lead in Sustainability and Inclusion. And I just invite you all to join our newsletter and pay attention to when that launch occurs in early June, so that we can continue this conversation, both there and then, as Scott had mentioned, at the reception as well. But then I'll hand it back to the closing.
And Chris, shall we take a photo, a customary photo with our esteemed panelists here? We have come to the conclusion of today's multi-paneled, multi-dimensional summit. While they take this photo, I want to just first start by saying thank you. Thank you to the team at AEO. Thank you to your diligence, your hard work, your creativity, your excitement, your enthusiasm, your desire for collaboration, your desire to impress me as a new leader, your desire to work together as team members, to do as we are doing and the culture that we're building of being there for each other, supporting each other, and picking up bouncing balls for a rapidly growing, evolving organization. This event would not have been possible without you, first and foremost. I want to thank the speakers for today's summit. They were dynamic, incredible, coming from across the country, but most importantly, coming from a cross-pollination of different thoughts, ideologies, perspectives, and organizational types. And this is exactly the type of organizational ecosystem diversity that we look forward to continuing to bring to you as AEO. We have board members in attendance here who I am sure are excited about this evening's reception, our board meeting tomorrow, but also about supporting this organization and its team as we steward in this new era. And I'd like to thank you, our attendees. You are more than attendees. You are community leaders across the country. You are our regional chairs for now what is 6 regions, because we heard you, okay? And we're excited about relaunching our Regional Council initiative, new team members joining our organization. I'm gonna say this. AEO has some good to great areas. You just heard Chelsea finish her comments by talking about a soon-to-come research study that AEO has done. For 32 years, AEO has been one of the stewards of research that serves as the voice to empower organizations like yours that speak on behalf of millions of small businesses across this country. We are at an inflection point. 16 million small businesses formed in the last 3 years. If you've ever felt that moment that you heard Allison mention where your head was down a little bit, be ye assured that the work that you do as economic development practitioners, entrepreneurial service providers, it matters more now than it ever did before. But we also know that we have finite resources. I heard the calls for $1 million here, calls for $5 million there. We will pass around a collection plate. And we want some of those too, okay? But all that just to say, again, that this is a collaboration sport. That is what an ecosystem is. It's a team effort. And AEO is a central part of that, and we endeavor to continue to be a central team player to each of you as you do this work across the country. Now, I don't know how humble it is to end my remarks by saying that I look forward to seeing y'all at my welcome reception after this event, but I will say it. I certainly look forward to seeing each and every one of you all at a celebration, not for me, although my name is there, but for AEO. For everyone that spoke here today, for our board who supports us, for our team members who made it happen, and for all that are part of the network of what AEO represents and has represented for 32 strong years. Thank you for being here. All right, let's get this party started.